You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast.
I'm looking at one of the comments and it cracks me up. So welcome back again. I'm Nate Vance. I had this foolproof plan. I'm here covering for Gary. I had this, what I considered to be a foolproof plan, and that I would encourage people that were more interesting than me to come on the show. And then I would just let them talk. And that way I could, prevent people from realizing how stupid I am. And then life happens, and one of my guests is going to be, she's running a little bit late because she has a life, and that's okay. So now I'm in the hot seat, and I have to prevent myself from looking stupid for the next 20 or 30 minutes. What I wanted to do tonight was, I'm gonna pivot a little bit off some things that were discussed on last night's show. When I was talking to Miss Loomer, and again, I thank her for her candor and graciousness for being able to show up and talk for almost 2 hours. One of the things she said that I think was important, and one of the things I wanted to focus on, was propaganda. And I do think there's a concerted propaganda operation that is being waged against the United States. And, in her instance, we kind of focused on the Russian aspect of it. I do think that it's more than just Russia. I think it's Russia, China, a little bit of North Korea, and then some of the Gulf states, Iran. A lot of them. And I think for the first time in history, they're kind of working together. They're doing a lot of the same things. But I think the Russian aspect of it is important because I think they are the global leaders. They are the most skilled, practitioners of this. And the reason they're so good at it is because they practiced on their own people. And during the Cold War, they had to rely on that information warfare because they knew they couldn't beat us kinetically. But that's a different subject. But there is something that's going on in the news recently that a lot of you have probably seen, and I think it's a little bit more profound than just being an awkward photo that looks kind of weird. Now, in this photo, you see Tucker Carlson, Joe Kent, Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene. They have one thing in common, and that's that they're all political losers, right? Tucker Carlson tried to join the CIA, wasn't allowed in. He got fired from Fox News. He kind of got ostracized for saying some wacky stuff after he got fired from Fox News. You have Joe Kent, who lost 2 elections, then got, we'll say, asked to leave the administration. Thomas Massie lost. Marjorie Taylor Greene lost. So they are political losers. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, right? People lose elections, right? Somebody has to lose, 50% has to lose every election, right? That's a normal thing. But one of the things that Laura Loomer mentioned last night is that she wrote some bylines for RT, and she went over the kind of history of how that occurred. And if you listen to her in what she said, she basically was disenfranchised, right? She felt disenfranchised and angry, and that's when she was approached. Now, if you look at every politician in that picture, they very well could all be feeling disenfranchised and be, juicy targets for somebody to reach out. Now, who do I think is actually reaching out to them? I think it's Tucker Carlson. This is just my opinion, but I don't think I don't think his interests are American in nature. I don't trust the guy. He says too many things that are pro-Russian. He seems to align with them too much. Right? And he's traveling over there, getting seduced by shopping carts that are coin operated. Now, the guest that we're going to have on is an expert in all of these things. Now, what I can do is I can recognize that there is a foreign op, that there is this information war that's being waged against the United States. What I'm not good at is how to deal with it. My sense of dealing with things that are, enemies of the United States is a little bit more aggressive than information operations. I'm not good at that. So there's another thing, and Jen, you might pull it up now, and that'll eat up some time, so I don't have to talk too much. But there's a guy named Yuri Bezmenov, and if you haven't heard of him, he was allegedly a KGB officer that defected, I think in the 80s, early 80s. And he came over and kind of listed how the Soviets or the Russians would go about their information campaign and kind of break down the societal structure in America. And people at the time thought he was a kook. They thought he was a nut job, right? They were like, this guy's not telling the truth. He's just a scam artist. Well, if you go down and look at the list of things that he mentioned, you can just start checking the list off of things that are happening now. So Jen, if you have that video, go ahead and play that video and then I'll kind of discuss it.
Do we know how far in, or we just going to start watching the whole thing?
Just start watching it and we'll talk about it as we go.
Okay.
Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. One of his interesting assignments was to brainwash foreign diplomats when they visited Moscow. And he'll tell us a little bit about how they did this and how they planted information which eventually wound up in the press of the free world. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Mr. Bezmenov, I'd like to begin by having you tell us a little bit about some of your childhood memories.
Well, the most vivid memory of my childhood was Second World War, or to be more precise, the end of the Second World War, when all of a sudden, United States, from a friendly nation, which helped us to defeat Nazism, turned overnight into a deadly enemy. And it was very shocking because all newspapers were trying to present an image of belligerent, aggressive American imperialism. Most of the things that we were taught is that United States is aggressive power, which is just about to invade our beautiful free socialist country, that American CIA is dropping Colorado beetles on our beautiful potato fields to eliminate our crops. And each schoolboy had a picture of Colorado bug on the back page of his notebook. And we were instructed to go into collective fields to search for those little Colorado bugs. Of course, we couldn't find any, neither we could find many potatoes. And that was explained again by the encroachments of the decadent imperialist power. The anti-American paranoia, hysteria in the Soviet propaganda was to of such a higher degree that many less skeptical people or less stubborn would really believe that United States is just about to invade our beautiful motherland, and some secretly hope that it will come true.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Well, getting back to life inside the Soviet Union or inside communist countries in general, in this country, at the university level primarily, we read and hear that the Soviet system is different from ours, but not that different, and that there is a convergence developing between all of the systems of the world, and that really it doesn't make an awful lot of difference what system you live under because you have corruption and dishonesty and tyranny and all that sort of thing. From your personal experience, what is the difference between life under communism and life?
Jen, can you pause there? Now, listen to what he just said. The university system, it seems like, they were teaching people, this is in the 80s, right? So 40 years ago, right? And they were saying, well, look, there's not that much of a difference between the Soviets and us. We should just be friends with them, right? Just normal stuff. Now, and I haven't watched this entire interview with Yuri Bezmenov, but I think you'll be surprised by his response, and he'll say, that's nonsense. There's a major difference. All right, go ahead, Jen.
The United States.
Well, life is obviously very much different for simple reason that the Soviet Union is a state capitalist economically. It's a state capitalism where an individual has absolutely no rights, no value. His life is nothing. It's just like an insect. He's disposable. Whereby in United States, even the worst criminal is treated as a human being. He has a fair trial, and some of them capitalize on their crimes. They publish their memoirs in their prisons and get handsomely paid by your crazy publishers. The differences, of course, in the daily life are very various, depending on whom we are talking about. In my own private life, I never suffered from communism simply because I was brought up in a family of high-ranking military officer. Most of the doors were open for me. Most of my expenses were paid by the government, and I never had any troubles with the authorities or with the police. So in other words, I would say I enjoyed, or I had good reasons to enjoy all the advantages of so-called socialist system. My main motivations to defect had nothing to do with affluence. It was mainly moral indignation, moral protest, rebellion against the inhuman methods of the Soviet system.
Well, specifically, what did you object to?
I objected, first of all, against oppression of my own dissidents and intellectuals. And that was the most disgusting thing that I witnessed as a young man, young student, who was brought up a very troublesome period in our history, from Stalin to Khrushchev, from total tyranny and oppression to some kind of liberalization. Second, when I started working for the Soviet embassy in India, to my horror, I discovered that we are millions times more oppressive than any colonial or imperialist power in the history of mankind. That my country brings to India not freedom, progress, and friendship between the nations, but racism, exploitation, and slavery, and of course economical inefficiency to this country. Since I fell in love with India, I developed something which by KGB standards is extremely dangerous thing. It's called split loyalty. When an agent likes a country of assignment more than his own country. I literally fell in love with this beautiful country, a country of great contrasts, but also great humility, great tolerance, and philosophical and intellectual freedoms. My ancestors used to live in caves and eat raw meat when India was a highly civilized nation 6,000 years ago. So obviously the choice was not to the advantage of my own nation. I decided to defect and to entirely dissociate myself from that brutal regime.
Mr. Bezmenov, we've read a lot about the
All right,
concentration camps and
you can
slave
pause it
labor
there.
camps under the...
So the interesting part to me about that little segment is when he talked about his experience with communism, and like people will say, well, communism ended in 1991 in Russia. Sort of, right? It's like it sort of did. They're still operating on that. Notice what he said. He said the state is capitalist, but the individual civilian doesn't have the ability to be, right? They don't get to benefit from that. And it's very much the same way now. It's an oligarchy, right? So you have a certain class of people who get to practice capitalism because they're the loyalists. They're the ones that the trusted inner circle. Most of those oligarchs are Putin's childhood friends, by the way. They're people that grew up with him and around him in St. Petersburg. And then for the rest of society, you are just cattle, right? Like you're a beast of burden. You're there to produce things for them to capitalize on. And it's important because when you start to see the socialist narrative, it is about class equality, which is the same diatribe that was presented to Russian peasants in the 1920s when communism was, coming up. And the reason they bring that up and the reason they talk about that is because that's how they get you to go along with it. And then once they achieve power, the class system comes back, right? And so this is important because you're starting to see a lot of the socialist narrative in the United States. And to me, socialism is just a word that is a gateway drug to communism. Right, that's what it basically is. So if you say you're socialist, you're just a diet communist, and you're gonna eventually. As soon as you get power, you're gonna push for communism anyway. So, all right, I think we can go ahead.
Stalin regime. Now the general impression in America is that those things are part of the past. Are they still going on today, or what is the status?
Yes. There is no qualitative change in the Soviet concentration camp system. There are changes in numbers of prisoners. Again, this is unreliable Soviet statistics. We don't know how many political prisoners are there in the Soviet concentration camps, but we sure know from various sources that at each particular time, there are close to 25 to 30 million of Soviet citizens who are virtually kept as slaves in forced labor camp system. The size of the population of a country like Canada is serving terms as prisoners.
Incredible.
So I would say that those intellectuals who try to convince American public that concentration camp system is a thing of a past are either conscientiously misleading public opinion, or they are not very intellectual people. They're selectively blind. They lack intellectual honesty when they say that.
Well, we've spoken about the intellectuals in this country and also the intellectuals in the Soviet Union. What about down at the broad mass level? Do the people in general, the working people, the workers in general in the Soviet Union, do they support the system? Do they tolerate it? What is their attitude?
Well, average Soviet citizen, if there is such an animal, of course, does not like the system because it hurts, it kills. He may not understand the reasons. He may not have enough information or educational background to understand. But I doubt very much there are many people who are conscientiously supporting the Soviet system. There are not such people in USSR. Even those who have all the reasons to enjoy socialism, people like myself, who were a member of journalistic elite, they also hate system for different reasons, though, not because they lack material affluence, but because they are unfree to think, they're in constant fear, duplicity, split personality. And this is the greatest tragedy for my nation.
Well, what do you think are the chances
Jen,
of the
Jen,
people
can you stop it there?
actually overcome?
So what he just mentioned, the constant fear, right? And, you know, I spent several years in Ukraine. And one of the things I noticed on my very first, you know, within the first few hours of me being in Ukraine, we rode on a bus from the train station to Lviv. And on that bus, you know, there was with a group of British guys that I met at the border, crossing the border. And there happened to be a BBC film crew that saw them speaking English, was interested in them. So they wanted to talk to him, and we didn't know how to get to Lviv, right? Like we didn't have a way to get there. So they had this Ukrainian fixer with them. She was a young lady. She was very friendly. And my thing was like, hey, look, we'll talk to them as long as their fixer figures out how to get us to Lviv. And so that was the exchange that we made. So they put us on this little, you know, Soviet era bus, and we were riding there. Now, young people in Ukraine, and you got to imagine this is very soon after the invasion started, within a couple of months. And on that bus, the BBC film crew was interviewing other people. It's like, what do you think about these guys being here? And most of the younger generation was like, look, we think it's great. Like, we need all the help we can get. This is awesome. Thank you guys for coming. But when they got to the older people, right, there was an older lady that, you know, she grew up under Soviet rule. She called the police on us for being there, because in her mind, she's like, well, they're coming back, and I don't want to be held responsible. And I sure as shit don't want to get, you know, put on camera supporting these foreign Western people coming here and defending, you know, a capitalist Ukraine. Now, do I think she really disliked us? Probably not, you know, but she's thinking, okay, well, the Soviets are back. You know what I mean? And that's how fearful she was. She wouldn't even address the camera. She just was like, do not film me. I don't want any of that. She tried to call the police, and the police obviously showed up, and they're like, yeah, what are you complaining about? So that's the level of fear that's ingrained in these people. I mean, this woman was probably in her 80s. You know, I felt bad because she was obviously nervous. But that's the level of fear that was ingrained in them, that even almost 50 years later, right, still terrified to the point where it's like, I just won't speak about it, right? I just won't, and I'll turn you in. And that's what she did. And so that fear that's drummed into people from this concept, this methodology, and this way of thinking, and this governance where you cannot dissent. You are not permitted to dissent. You're not permitted to even think about it, right? Now, they can't prove what you're thinking about, but you certainly cannot verbalize those things. So it's like, you can still see the remnants of it and the traces of it today in the older generations in some of these post-Soviet nations. And it's an interesting point. All right, Jay.
Becoming their system or replacing it.
There is a great possibility that system will sooner or later be destroyed from within. There is a self-destructive mechanism built into any socialist or communist or fascist system, because there is lack of feedback, because the system does not rely upon loyalty of population. But until this Soviet junta is being supported by the Western so-called imperialists, that is, multinational companies, establishments, governments, and let's face it, intellectuals, so-called academia in the United States is famous for supporting the Soviet system. As long as the Soviet junta will keep on receiving credits, money, technology, grain deals, and political recognition from all these traitors of democracy or freedom, there is no hope. There is not much hope for changes in my country, and the system will not collapse by itself simply because it's being nourished by so-called American imperialism. This is the greatest paradox in history of mankind, when capitalist world supports and actively nourishes its own destructor.
I think you're trying to tell us something.
Can
Yes.
you pause there, Jen?
I'm trying to.
Now, this is something that is particularly important, because when the Soviet Union collapsed, the institutions that were left behind did not just simply evaporate, right? The KGB became the FSB, the GRU still existed. They stumbled a bit for a few years. But then, if you remember, during Trump's first term, he went to Germany and he told the Europeans, you need to stop buying so much Russian energy because it will come back to haunt you. And if you remember, the entire European media basically laughed at him and called him a fat dumbass for 3 weeks in their news cycle. I don't think that was something that Trump forgot. And then in 2022, what happened, right? The money that was sent into Russia, the same concepts, right? And this is the reason I'm bringing this up is because even though the Soviet Union fell and it did cause the Russians to stumble, the apparatchik that was there is the same. I mean, Putin was a KGB officer, for Christ's sakes. He is part of that system. And he did not simply forget all of the methods that he learned while he was a KGB officer. He's going to continue to do that's what he was brought up in. It's in his DNA now, right? So he is not going to change. And again, I think this is more, the issue of this propaganda is broader than just Russia. But this is an example of, how their ecosystem and their mindset is, and how different it is to the American thought process, where human beings have no value. Opinions are irrelevant. Only the loyalist class gets to experience any sense of capitalism or upward mobility. These are all things that are very foreign to Americans, but it is a thought process that is as common as, going to work, working a 9-to-5 job and supporting your family in the United States. That's how common it is of a thought process amongst the people that are running these countries. That's how they think. And it's important to understand how they think, because you cannot combat them unless you understand their mindset. So although this is might be a little bit boring watching this, and it is a little tedious going through this interview with this former Soviet guy, it's important to realize that these systems are essentially still in place in that country, and there are a lot of other nations. Iran is probably fairly similar. If you're a member of the IRGC, the Islamic regime, you probably do very well. If you're not, it's a different set of circumstances, right? So same thing with China, same thing with North Korea, right? But as soon as you dissent, you're out, right? It's either a cup of tea or a trip out a window. All right, Jen, you can keep going.
I tell you that it has to be stopped unless you want to end up in Gulag system and enjoy all the advantages of socialist equality, working for free, catching fleas on your body, sleeping on the planks of plywood in Alaska this time, I guess. That's where Americans will belong, unless they will wake up, of course, and force their government to stop aiding Soviet fascism.
Well, you told us a moment ago why you left the system. I'd like to hear the details of how you did it. It must have been a very dangerous thing.
It was not so dangerous. It was crazy. First of all, because defecting in India is virtually impossible, thanks to very strong pressure from the Soviet government.
Excuse me, you were in India on assignment at that time.
Yes, I was working for the Soviet embassy in New Delhi as a press officer. Mm-hmm. And defecting for a Soviet diplomat is next to impossible. It's a suicide, as I said, because a great friend Indira Gandhi pushed a law through parliament which says, and I quote, "No defector from any country has a right of political asylum in any embassy on the territory of Indian Republic," which is a masterpiece of hypocrisy. No other defector but the Soviet one needs a political asylum. So knowing that perfectly well, I planned a craziest possible way to defect. I studied counterculture in India. There were thousands of young American boys and girls with no shoes, long hair, smoking hash and marijuana, studying sometimes Indian philosophy, sometimes simply pretending that they studied. And they greatly annoyed Indian police, and they were laughing stock of Indians because obviously they were good for nothing students. I studied carefully where they congregate, what routes they travel, what language they speak, what do they smoke. And one day I simply joined a group of hippies to avoid detection of Indian police. I was dressed as a typical hippie with blue jeans, long kameez shirts, with all kind of nice decorations like beads, long hairs. I bought a wig because for several weeks I had to turn myself from a conservative Soviet diplomat into a very progressive American hippie. And that was the only way that I could avoid detection. It was very interesting experience, but it was necessary because from my own knowledge as a member of Soviet embassy staff, I knew that there were many cases when Soviet defectors were betrayed by Indian police, and also some Western embassies played a very dirty role in betraying the Soviet defectors. According to our information, they were some, I wouldn't call them double agents, but simply immoral people working for this for the United States embassy, and confiding in people like this would be a suicide. So I had to be extremely careful. I could not trust anyone, and that was the
Jen,
reason for such a.
Can you pause? All right. First of all, we have our guest here, and I am very thankful because I am not good at propping up this thing on my own. So
I am so sorry, guys. It's because I had a standing appointment I had to go to. So, and thank you for having me here, Nate. And Jen, you're amazing. Thank you for connecting us. And Monica Matthews, who connected us as well. She's just brilliant. So I saw you're watching Yuri Bezimov. I'm so excited about that. Have you seen him before, Nate?
I've seen him before, and I've read a lot of the a lot of the transcripts and kind of the list of things that he said he would do. But I think some of going back to like the Soviet system and watching the whole thing is important because there's a lot of parallels with what you see now. And kind of what I was just explaining to the audience is like, you know, everybody thinks that in 1991 the Soviet Union just ceased to exist, right? And it did in name only, really, right?
Right.
The apparatuses that were there and the institutions remained, right? So the KGB just changed its name to the FSB, right? Like that's essentially the you know, one of the things that happened. And then Yuri himself, what's interesting is he, you know, was like, yeah, I was a press officer for the KGB, which now is the modern version of that is RT. They are a government institution. They are not an independent news agency with the ability to exercise free thought and freedom of expression. They are required to produce certain materials, right? And it gets reviewed by government officials, which is not at all what happens in the United States. If they did, I'm pretty sure a relative of mine would tell me to shut up on a regular basis, but he doesn't, right? He allows me to do whatever I want. He doesn't care.
Right.
You know, it's important to draw those parallels before he talks about, you know, the list of how they go about kind of breaking the back of American society. I don't know that we need to go through the entire video. If you have knowledge of what he's going to say and you can quote it directly, like we can just quote it and then post the link in the comments or something like that and let people watch it on their own.
Right.
But if there's certain points that you want to hit, but before that, what I would like you to do is introduce yourself and tell everybody why you're here. Again, I am learning this, so I'm going to fumble a bit. So,
well, I know it's great, Van. Like Nick, look, this is part of the process of learning to be in front of camera versus like on the ground, boots on ground, doing investigative work, right? And that's one of the things that I've done. I've been in front of camera for networks like Newsmax, and I've gone throughout the world and interviewed heads of state, et cetera, et cetera. But my personal feeling, I always feel most comfortable being behind the scenes doing the investigative work. And I think a lot of us with our backgrounds, I'm prior naval surface warfare officer, although a certain Georgian honeypot who shall remain nameless tends to think that I have no military background, come and ask the DD for the DD-214 ESA, because asking for those things do come with a background check. And, of course, you don't want to do that, do you? But I am a prior naval surface warfare officer. I wrote the doctrine for our special forces, specifically the SEALs, embarking on amphibious warships to use them as forward staging bases, which is exactly what they're doing right now in certain parts of the world. And I joined into. I was invited really as a Catholic journalist to start reporting on news in the Catholic Church. And it just ended up happening that I took a position as a defense contractor that brought me over to Rome. And I was in Rome during COVID, which was like the best time for someone who is an introverted individual. And I myself am an extroverted introvert, so I tend to get my energy being alone. And from Roman history, which is my undergraduate degree. So it was a perfect time to be in Rome, all things considered. But during that time, I was reporting on the Vatican. I covered as a member of the press corps into the Holy See. And then I was asked to join Daily Wire. And so I do reporting, investigative journalism still for Daily Wire. However, I am not so much online now, Nate, as I was probably 6 months ago, because I work out of a secure building now, doing work for the Office of the Secretary of War in acquisitions, transformation, and strategic communications, and integrating AI and all that fun stuff. So that's my background, Nate.
Okay. Well, you see, this is why I have people like you and Laura last night. You're far more interesting than I am. So it's very easy just to hand you the microphone and be like, go do your stuff. But I'm going to give you the cliff notes of kind of what I went over with the audience prior to your arrival. So the first thing that I opened with was that photo of Tucker Carlson and Joe Kent and Marjorie Taylor Greene all sitting around the dinner table, which looks eerily like, the night that Hitler decided to start a political party in Germany. But Hey, it's just
I mean, it's just
you guys staged
allegedly.
you guys staged the photo. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like don't
exactly.
blame me for
Noticing.
yeah, absolutely. But last night, Laura mentioned something about her kind of realization that she went through the entire timeline of her realization that she may have made a mistake when it came to Ukraine and Russia being the good guys versus the bad guys. And what she talked about is she went through a phase where she was deplatformed during a political campaign, and that may have cost her the race. And she felt very disenfranchised, and because she was deplatformed on so many social media accounts, she had no voice, and that disenfranchisement and anger made her a soft target. And it was then that RT reached out to her and said, we can give you a voice. Right. And she, to her credit, very much, she realized like, hey, look, I'm ashamed of it. Right. And I'm never going to stop giving her credit for realizing it and having the guts to come out and publicly say that. Most people wouldn't. They would just continue to remain married to their toxic ideas, right? And just say, no, it was right the whole time.
Or fade, like in an organic sense, away from that. Like I'm not going
slowly,
to do mea culpa. Right.
Yeah, just a slow transition and then just pretend like it never happened, right?
Exactly.
So I give a lot of credit for coming out and just saying, look, I got it wrong, and here's why, and here's what I'm doing to kind of, rectify that mistake. Good on her. Yeah. But then you look at that photo, right? And that photo is full of disenfranchised political losers, right? Tucker Carlson fired from Fox and kind of ostracized by the, what they would consider to be neocons or the kind of old Republican Party. Joe Kent lost 2 elections and got fired, by the administration. I mean, he says he resigned, but I'm thinking they asked him to leave.
I just have to say, an absolute disgrace to his uniform. Absolute disgrace for what he did with regards to information, and that still is yet to come out.
Yeah, look, here's what I'll say about Joe Kent. His service while in uniform, for by all accounts, is exemplary, and I'm not going to criticize.
For sure, it's
his service in the White House and how he conducted that exit from the White House was disgraceful, in my opinion. And I said that right away. Right, I actually have a saved text message where I was like, well, WTF, you know what I mean? Like,
well, and Nate, like, if you're going to run on the uniform, you better represent the uniform.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
And that's exactly what he did. I'm a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL, veteran, lost his life. That all of that comes with real serious implications. I am willing to give up my life for my country. I have paid the ultimate sacrifice, and my children have, from losing my wife. Meanwhile, the reality is quite different. Post and it's one of the things, the connection to Max Blumenthal, in my opinion, has not been dug further. And the fact that Max Blumenthal decided to come after me for simply reporting that his wife was working for him at one point, and who is very, by his wife, I mean, Joe Kent's second wife, the woman who met Joe Kent very shortly after he buried his wife, to watch their children. All of that is something I think needs to be looked at, because you bring up the point when you talk about what Laura said. I was in a vulnerable place. I found myself at effect, angry and at effect, and I got picked up by RT, right? I was targeted. Now compare that to Joe Kent. Vulnerable place, targeted, new wife, worked with Max Blumenthal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is where, we were going to talk about tonight, like how do people get targeted? Yuri Bezimov is amazing, because what he did was open up the floodgates to how Americans were targeted by the Russians during the Cold War, specifically looking at culture? How do you undermine the culture? How do you infiltrate? One of the things that Yuri Bezmov speaks about in another interview in a class that he did, he says, and I've brought this up in spaces before. He said he never knew someone who would die for any truth. He said, 2 + 2 = 4. I don't know if I could line up a group of individuals against the wall and say, will you die for that truth? 100%. He said 100% of the people would say, no, it's 5, right? He said, you do the same thing with regards to your faith, your God. Those people lined up against the wall, only maybe one will deny him. He said that says something about why the Russians, when it was Lenin and later on, would say that religion was the opiate of the people. They recognized that ideology is the hardest thing to change. People who were in the death camps in Auschwitz, they would later write that the Nazis stripped them of everything, but they could not take their faith and free will. Right. And so when we start to see that the Russians during the Cold War recognized that the American people were very strongest at their faith, they saw the opportunity to infiltrate facets of especially the Christian faith in a way to water down and modernize and bring out like secular humanism. And we see it currently, and we have been seeing it as a Catholic, we've been seeing it in several papacies now. We've seen it with Pope Francis, secular humanism. We are now seeing shadows of it within the Holy See and those who are serving Pope Leo. In particular, his Secretary of State, who is the instrument behind the secret deal of the Vatican and the CCP. This is, and also I always like to bring up that this particular cardinal, who is the Secretary of State, he also called for a 2-state solution 6 days after October the 7th. Okay, so there is, and that reaction right there, Nate, was what I received from the Patriarch of Jerusalem. I interviewed Cardinal Pizzaballa. That is the exact response when I interviewed him on video, when I brought that particular situation up. So please understand that when it comes to the Catholic faith, Catholic Charities, we've seen the movement of personnel in the United States being supported, people who have illegally entered the United States or those who are Muslim refugees, working, the Catholic Charities working first, and the U.S. Catholic bishops working first with the Obama administration. And later on, the Catholic Charities working with the Biden administration, openly receiving monies to do this. When you see that, you say, okay, I'm starting to see the process of how the Russians, what Yuri Bezmov talks about, how to demoralize, destabilize, infiltrate, and then normalize a new religion, right? And so there's a fight like that. And where we could go into Dugin, Alexander Dugin, is that when it comes to intelligence, they play both sides of the house always. The Chinese do it and the Russians do it. So they're going to demoralize on one side, and then they're going to put demoralize on the other side and black pill on the other side on the political spheres. So we're seeing that now in the horseshoe right. So they're doing the same thing. Traditionalists, oh, we're the only remnant. We're the trad wife. Women should stay at home. Women should, never work. And like a lot of anger. Again, anger is a big deal within these. A lot of isolationism. And then you see the Tucker Carlson's response, right? So you've got, or the Candace Owens, right?
Yeah.
You say, I'm Jew, I'm Christian, I'm Catholic, and I'm going to declare upon my Catholicism, just like Joe Kent, I'm going to appeal to my experience as a Navy SEAL and a war widow.
Just for the record, Joe Kent was a Green Beret. not a Navy SEAL.
Oh, my apologies. I thought
Yeah, he was a Green Beret.
he was a Green Beret.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I think he was a Navy SEAL?
Because his wife was
thank
a
you for
naval
that correction.
intelligence officer.
That's why. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes. Okay. There you go. In any case, thank you for that correction. That the intent is at the same time is to infiltrate, to take the narrative and to twist it towards a demoralization, and in doing so, break up the foundation of real true ideology, Christianity. The one place that they weren't targeting up until now were the evangelicals. And so now we're saying that.
It's something too that, like the Russian Orthodox Church, this is something that in America, there's this sense that the Russian Orthodox Church is just a very, old-fashioned, like traditional Christian values church. Now, I'll give you an example of my experience with the Russian Orthodox Church.
Sure.
I can't necessarily prove this, but I'm as certain as someone can be without physical evidence, right? I was on an observation post, and the only thing that could see me was a Russian Orthodox church, right? The only thing that could physically see me as a person, right? And I was kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was not an obvious place to be. And suddenly I realize I am under a time on target attack, right? Like there is grad rockets, helicopters, 155 or 152s, 120 mortars.
That sounds familiar.
81 millimeter mortars, right?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Right? Now, the only group of people that could have figured out that I was there, because I was not doing visual observation, I was doing, radio reconnaissance, things like that. So anyway, I'm not going to go into what I was doing specifically.
Yeah.
But then later, that very same church was raided, and they had Russian radios, money that had been transferred, all of those things, right? So it adds up. They tried to kill me, right?
Well, the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, Kirill, was an infiltrated. I mean, he was part of the KGB. He infiltrated.
I know.
Most people don't pay attention to the fact that he is now the head of the Russian Orthodox, to the point that the Russian Orthodox has now, or rather the Greek Orthodox, have split. Patriarch Bartholomew has split from the Russian Orthodox Church. No one wants to talk about that, do they? It's all about trad and the Third Rome, according to Carlo Maria Vigano.
And the funny part was, when I picked that location, in my naive American mind, I'm like, well, it's a church. They're neutral, right? They're not going to participate in this. It's not true. They're combatants, essentially. If you're reporting troop locations, you are a combatant, right? Like that's how that works.
Who taught the Palestinians?
Well, Russia.
Well, and before that, the Nazis. It's so funny because I saw someone posted the other day. They're like, I know, who it was? It was Gary. Gary posted this. He said something like Nazis and communists. And I'm like, it's like, oh, I'm a Nazi and a communist, something like that. Like someone was trolling him. I'm like, why not both? Because they're the same thing, except it's like one side, it's like one coin, different sides. I mean, this is what they do. It's the same type of ideology, it's just the way they look at it.
Speaking of Nazis and communists being, aligned, they invaded Poland together to start World War II.
They did.
That was a team effort, and they were there's video of them high-fiving each other in the center of Warsaw. And people seem to forget that the Soviet Union initiated the Second World War, and it was the only reason. Yeah,
more people than the World War II. The Soviet Union killed more people in horrific ways and in the gulags than the people who died during World War II. That's a massive amount of people. But because we didn't see them, because we just heard about the gulags, it's not as poignant.
Well, and then you can take the Holodomor in Ukraine, where they killed millions of Ukrainians via starvation. They just took their food.
Right.
And there was was it a New York Times reporter that was there? and the Russians were like giving him underage prostitutes to keep him writing positive things about the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I mean, that's Yuri Bezimov did that. That was his thing. So a lot of people don't understand that Yuri Bezimov wasn't just a journalist. Yuri Bezimov was an intelligence psyops expert, right? They took their best for psyops in order to engage with the West. Yuri would not have left and gone to India, for example. He wouldn't have gone to India. He would not have been deployed that way if he wasn't the best of the best, right? And
Well,
another thing is that the Russians, the Chinese do this too. They always, the Chinese, the way that they go and approach this type of behavior is that they will bring usually cash. And the Chinese say, and you see this often in Africa, the Chinese say, you bring one bag of cash, and if they don't come to the table, then you give two, right? But their intent is to be able to buy you off, and if they're able to do that, then they know how to be able to exploit you afterwards. But they'll also use the moral side thing of trying to get you honeypotted as well. The Chinese will do that, and we've seen that throughout in Washington D.C. It's just rife, right? The real concern is how the Russians do it. And so, again, not to mention a Georgian honeypot who's been multiple times on Tucker Carlson now, but the fact of the matter is when Tucker Carlson decided to platform this individual in the last 24, it was like the last week, he platformed her again. He starts off saying, there are people who say that you are a Russian spy. And he's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
At that point, every single individual listening to this should have been like, okay, then we're going to turn you off because everything out of her mouth is a lie. Everything.
Yeah. It's funny too, because you mentioned honeypots in Washington, D.C. and Matt Tardio and I, who was another Green Beret, were both in Washington for a conference about a month or two ago. And both of us speak a little bit of Russian, right? Matt's actually speaks it better than I do. And there was this very attractive young woman, right? Very Slavic looking, right? And there was a group of them. And they had a handler who was pretending not to be with them, He was also a very Slavic looking gentleman. And they came up and approached us. And now, look, I'm 47 years old, right? And there's this old adage that, if you're an operative and you're in a foreign country, it's like, look, if she's a 10 and you're a 3 and she's interested, she's a spy, right? She's not interested in you. And, look.
The teams especially, it's so funny because you get trained with this. This is why I'm seeing this particular Georgian honeypot taking pictures with a certain Texan prior Navy SEAL this time, definitely Navy SEAL. And it's saying to myself, do we need to go back to some remedial training? Yes.
You do. And what was funny though is this young woman, she started coming up to us, and Matt asked her in Russian, "Do you speak Russian?" And she said no. And we were like, "How do you know what we said?"
Yeah,
she'd been drinking a little bit. And she was like, "Oh shit," she knew she was caught. 5 minutes later,
I have to talk. Matt and I have conversations like this quite a bit. I really do need to reach out and have I love these sea stories. We call them sea stories in the Navy, but I love these war stories because no one can come up with this crap. But I'm glad that you guys spot it and had fun. I tend to do this on I won't speak Chinese, but I will write it at times, and especially on X, if I see one of their clear operatives, I'll just respond to them in Chinese. I did respond to the Georgian honeypot in Georgian. So she was trying to troll and I just responded in Georgian. So, I mean, it's fun. It's fun when it starts to be human, fun.
Yeah.
But they're there.
This one was so obvious. I was like, listen, that was the B squad, I'm pretty sure, of the Russian outreach program.
I don't know. DC is very, very, it's surprising how vulnerable our leaders are.
Well,
it's really just surprising.
So, I mean, look, alcohol, that's the thing too. Most of your, wherewithal and your inhibitions, alcohol's a problem. right? And there's a
It's
lot of
also
drinking.
pride, Nate. It's also pride. It's like that kind of sense of you could do no wrong. You've made it into the hollow hills of the halls of the Washington D.C. the corridors. I mean, it's the same thing in the Vatican as well. I like to say like Vatican is Washington D.C. but slower and inept in IT. They're technologically inept, but I mean they play the game as well. And I will tell you, I can tell you exactly where agencies tend to hang out and have coffee in the morning. I can point to you where they are. I can tell you I've gone through certain parts of the Vatican doing doing sweeps for bugs, and that place is super bugged. You don't want to talk about anything over there.
There's I learned in Ukraine, like there is some remedial training that needs to be done, because I would be in Kyiv, and there's a guy in his like gray man uniform with his like he's wearing his tactical pants and his tactical boots and his tactical. I was like, oh, okay, it's almost to the point where I can tell which SF group they were with before they went to agency. And I'm like, oh, okay, you used to be, you were in the teams, and then you went to the, and then you joined over. Dude, you're obvious as like the sunrise. Or like everybody can see you. You look different.
Nate, that sounds like a job. That sounds like an idea for a particular contracting. I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, might need to do some remedial training with these guys.
Yeah. If you know some people, let me know. But look, the reason I had you on, right, is because I think it's fair to say it's obvious that there is foreign influence. I think for the first time in history, too, what we're seeing is not just the existence of, and look, foreign ops are going to go on all the time, right? That's always going to happen. The internet introduces a certain access to the American, just the average American civilian that we didn't see like during the Cold War, right? It was harder to get access to the average American. Now it's easy. So that's one thing that's different. The other thing that's different is I think that difficult to prove, but I believe that there is some coordination between some of the Gulf states, Russia. We know there's coordination between Iran and Russia, North Korea, the big ones that you would suspect. And I don't think that we have seen a coordinated effort between these nations all kind of working towards the same thing. I think there's a little bit of an announcement of that with BRICS, where they said they wanted to, replace the reserve currency. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of an obvious. That was a misstep. I think that was a fumble on their part. They said the quiet part out loud. So what I want to do, and this might be difficult to do over the course of like one podcast, because this is, like you said, a course of training, but somewhat, identify, like kind of verify that these ops are existing primarily on the internet, because I think that's how most average Americans are targeted. And then number two, okay, so we've proven it's there. How do you, and then for the average person, how do you recognize it if you're scrolling through your feed that you can say, that's bullshit, right? Like I'm not that's an op right there. This is a bot, or this is somebody who is planning there to influence me in a negative way. Right. And then maybe on a broader sense, like as a nation, how do we combat this? Like I don't know if there is an answer, because,
going on the offensive, that's the answer. We have to go on the offensive. And that's exactly what this podcast does. This is what Gary does. Gary and I have had this conversation. Many of my brothers in special forces have recognized that this is PSYOPs. It's because we have been trained in this, right? So we recognize we've been given a certain set of skills, and those skills are, I think it's also, there's a moral code that we go by where it's never trust, always verify, and I think that has to be the case, whether it's your brother that's serving next to you. Like, you trust that guy, it's because he's earned the trust, right? And when it comes to PSYOPs, or what we read in the news, what I experienced, and I'm sure what you experienced too, is the thing that we saw and did during war was very different than how it was being portrayed in the media. And so we became very conscious about how it's played and how media is played. And then if we were lucky enough to work with, say, Army PSYOPs, And we saw how they did psyops or you yourself were trained in psyops, or you were the public affairs officer. You started to see the pattern of how easily people can be manipulated. So I'm all in. Let's do this. I'm interested in talking specifically about and addressing our audience about how do you discern in an age of social media? How do you discern? Because it's not just foreign influence. It's, as Yuri Bezimov talks about, we're doing it to ourselves now. And he said in his talk that he and the KGB officers who were targeting were shocked at how quickly Americans adopted the mindset and were demoralizing themselves. And so we've got to, and I think we're at a time right now where there is a never trust, always verify with the media, certain groups. I think that's starting to wane a bit because social media is so inundated with influencers. Everybody wants to be on a mic, as we're on the mic saying it, but like it's true.
Yeah. Well, look, Podcastistan is, if there's one thing that has driven people back to legacy media, it's the idiots.
It's that. That's exactly right.
They have damaged themselves. They had a golden opportunity to just not be idiots. Right. And they have chosen to be idiots almost 100% of the time. Almost.
And that was to me, that was a brilliant strategic move from our adversaries. One of the first things I would say to those who are listening right now, who are parents, go to your kids' phones or their computers and wipe TikTok off of them, and do not permit them to have TikTok ever. It has and has always been a Chinese psyop. And during COVID, if you heard about transgender and frog self and all of these pronouns nonsense, that was all from TikTok. Deep fakes, TikTok. The Chinese were running with them in COVID. Deep fakes. One favorite one of mine was one that was exposed as a deep fake, where two Chinese actors were given Anglo faces, and it showed a young woman. She was a young Chinese woman, but she looked Anglo, Western, and she's being proposed to by a young, obviously Chinese man, but Anglo, and he's putting the engagement ring on her finger. And she starts to see flashes of what her life is going to be, where she's having to do all the cooking and the cleaning and the holding the babies, and she's exhausted. She has no time for herself. And then she kind of steps back and she sees her life without that. The Chinese communists and the Russian communists had a playbook during the 50s and 60s that focused on destroying the nuclear family. And in fact, they were successful in Romania to the point, and the intent was that children should be raised by the state for the purposes of being cogs in the machine. And if you recall, Nate, in the 1980s and 90s, Romania began to be open. And what we saw in the Romanian orphanages were children who had what was now diagnosed as reactive attachment disorder. I know about reactive attachment disorder very well because my parents adopted two children from Korea with severe reactive attachment disorder. You can recognize it immediately when you see these children. So the intent of the state is to take over your entire being. You will own nothing and you will be happy about it. When did we hear about that? When was that?
Was that the World Economic Forum? Wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was. So now we're starting to see where big government, big statecraft, those who were trying to push the WHO nonsense during COVID, where all of that was coming into play as well. And all of this is to say, on social media, my guidepost, my weather vane for discernment of psyops is, how is this seeking to impact me emotionally? If I am being provided facts and evidence and reporting that go into deep detail, and the reporting could make me angry, but the way that it's being reported, the evidence that's being reported is irrefutable, scientific method, right? And that person who's presenting it to you is doing it in such a professional and calm way, Nate, that is an indication that that is not crisis pornography. But if you are dealing with anything that is raising the temperature in your mind, your passions, your lower faculties, those emotions, whether it makes you super happy or super sad or super, I call it crisis pornography for a reason. Anything that titillates those emotions, the likelihood that you're being exploited is very high. So that should be the first indication. After that, what are they trying to communicate to you? What is the thing that they're trying to do? Are they trying to confirm your biases? Are they trying to make you afraid? What is the intent here of the messaging?
I think,
And that's where you follow it.
and I think, as somebody, like, I have not received any, like, professional training on this. I just lived in a society where obviously the Russians were trying to influence the people there, right? So I was very inundated with that. And then just through immersion and kind of osmosis, I kind of picked up like their methodology. But what I noticed was if the underlying message is trying to break down your faith in the institutions,
yes,
that are, you know what I mean? So it's like, you can't trust your government. They're always lying to you.
You can't trust your church. They are lying to you and they're manipulating you. You can't trust your family because they don't accept you. Like, how far is this that you can't trust anymore? Trust me, though. Actually trust me. Like, I bring the receipts.
Well, and then the other thing that I noticed is that truth is fungible, right? And that's where you start to hear people in the modern era saying things like, well, my personal truth. There is no such thing as your personal truth. There is just the truth. Like you said earlier, 2 + 2 = 4. I don't care where you are in the universe. Like, it is 4. That's what it is. Right. And when people start to say, well, to me, it means, I was like, shut up. This is not, that to me is somebody who's been
easily manipulatable.
Yeah.
He said that those are the people that if I was to target someone for nefarious means, those are the first people to use. Those are, as Yuri Bezimov calls, the useful idiots. Yep.
Yeah. Listen, I used that phrase in an article one time. I got in trouble for it. So I got to be careful with that.
Did you use it in Russian?
No. I used it in
next
reference.
Time.
I used it. Yeah. I used it in reference to a family member of mine. No, I'll explain it because, like, let me explain it because I do think I was not misquoted, but I think the sentiment, in that little snippet, if you just read that, you're like, oh, he called his cousin an idiot. That's not what I did at all.
But what I said was, but that's
no. What my point was that the Russians don't think like us, right? That their leadership do not think like us. And if you approach them in a manner that you think you're going to charm them or negotiate with them in some way, they will look at you like a useful idiot, right? Mm-hmm. They will be like, oh, well, this guy's easy, right? He thinks he can charm us, and you can't, right? Like, if you take Putin and the people that surround him, as awful as they are as human beings, they're not stupid human beings. They're very good at this. Right? They're very good at this. They're very experienced at it. And they are very familiar with the American mindset of saying, let's make a deal. And they will use it as a cudgel to beat you to death with. So, I said, look, they will think of you as useful idiots if you go over there trying to charm them. And I think they went over there and tried to charm them and it didn't work out. So, I still stand by my words, but
his book is really interesting. Have you read Putin's autobiography, First Person?
No, I haven't.
it always is interesting to dive into these minds, whether or not you hate Hitler, which you should. It's always interesting to read, like, where was his mindset? It's a rambling nonsense, Mein Kampf, but it's not a rambling nonsense. Putin's, he's very sharp. I do think he might have a touch of the tism, to be honest.
A little bit.
I think
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But I appreciate his love of dogs. I mean, look, I'm going to just say it. He may be a monster, but there's a little bit of hope for humanity for every one of us when you see how someone treats dogs. And he protects his dogs. He may hate people, but he protects his dogs. So I think to myself, maybe there's still some hope for Putin.
I can't go there. I can't go there with him.
No, I know.
He's irredeemable
Evil.
to me. But
Evil.
yeah, he is.
Evil.
Yeah, he's
truly.
he's gone.
I do feel for the dog. But because I mean, I think it was the Chinese who gave him his dog, and then the Chinese were like pulling it up by. I think it was the Chinese. They were holding him, the little puppy, up by the scruff, and I'm like, those people are even worse. Like, I don't even know. Like, they were just.
I think it was the Japanese.
Was it the
Japanese
did
that
it?
gave him the big Akita,
Those
and then
people
he
were even worse.
Yeah.
I just but hey, going back to the psyops, one of the things that I've been very interested in is really how the origin of Russia being the good actor in this war began, because anybody who even has a modicum of common sense understands that crossing the border of a sovereign nation is an act of war. I mean, I don't know. Like, it is an act of war. Like, that nation is responsible for that act of war, right? They could say that, look, we were justified. We've done it as well, right? I mean, when you go to war, you cross it. So there could be a justification. But to say that Russia was not at fault for the beginning of this war is poppycock. Just literally own it, Russia. Own it.
Well,
right? But they couldn't.
Like our current situation in Iran, right? Now, we had reasons to go there, right? Like, we had reasons
started
to
it.
bomb them.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
but
did we start it really?
That might not be a good example. That might not be a good example. That might not be a good example. Well, if you talk about this current bout of violence, right, that is occurring, we chose to do that. Now, you can say it's right or wrong, and I've said this about Ukraine multiple times. It's like, look, there may have been a debate, but it's like when I played high school football, they were like, look, you can get in an argument with a member of the opposing team, and you might say words, but if you strike that guy first, you are wrong, right? Like, that's just a lesson we learn as kids. Is like, if you throw the first punch, you started the fight, right? It doesn't matter if
you're responsible. That's the big thing. You could be right or wrong. It could be but you are the responsible party for the consequences that will return to you. And I think if you take a look at like what happened, say, Israel and Gaza, right? It's even worse because you don't have uniformed military doing this. Although I can't say that now because the Russians are just haphazardly targeting, and they have been, civilians. But uniformed military. When it comes to Gaza, you have unlawful combatants coming across the border. And then everybody and their brother throughout the world jumped on the opportunity to say, they're the ones who are actually the oppressed. We're going to support them. They did nothing wrong. Well, they suffered the consequences of choosing to go up against a uniformed military that is quite stronger than they are.
Exactly, right. This is one of the issues that I think over the, almost 90 years of the Pax Americana, that we have become, prior to World War II, our concept of military force was overwhelming, violence until the enemy was absolutely crushed, right? And then we hit this kind of peaceful
that quote, right? Like what? Yeah. What is that quote? It's what, like, placing fear into our enemies, like, like it's something about like.
What are you talking about? Sherman, William Tecumseh Sherman had a quote. I don't know if this is the one you're thinking of, but he said, "War is cruelty. If you want it to end quickly, apply as I'm going to get it wrong.
Something like that. Yes.
Apply as much cruelty as you can as fast as possible.
Right. I think I was thinking more of Conan the Barbarian, but I think
to crush your enemies and to hear the lamentations of their women. Yeah. See it. Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their women. Yeah. Yeah, Conan, what are the greatest things in life?
Well, you went the historical valid point way, but I decided to go the way of the movies. But there's validity.
The problem that we've gotten into is we've allowed ourselves to believe that proportionality is a viable strategy, and it's right. Literally never successful, right?
Never.
Disproportionate response is how you win and end things, and I think we've lost that message somewhere along the way.
What we did during our 20-year war that you and I both fought in was siege warfare in the 21st century. That's what that was. It was slow crawling death, losing men on our side in proportion of men on their side, and yet somehow people say, "Oh, well, that was justified." No. When you come at the United States, you will have fear and loathing for generations to come. That's how it should happen. Yeah, so that wars we don't fight the wars, because what comes is overwhelming.
And it's not worth it, right? Like when you talk about deterrence, right? The goal of deterrence is obviously to avoid a fight in the first place. But then if you have to fight it, the result of that fight should be a deterrent for any future potential adversary that's like, I don't want any of that. I don't want any of that.
There's a video that's going viral right now of a Hawaiian candidate for office who decided to take a swing at a guy with a chair. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, got it right. And, the guy's being warned, and he's like, this guy's threatening a woman. He's threatening people. I supposedly threatened people with a knife. He keeps getting warned, don't come at me, brother. Don't come at me, brother. And then he starts to try to fight. He throws a chair and he gets knocked the heck out. Right. And to me, and then the guy who knocks him out goes right over to him, as to wake him up and says, don't do it again. Right. That should be kind of how the American experience should be. Like,
it should be.
You knock them out, you put them on the ground, you make them beg to stop, and you take the high ground. You take the high ground, and you give them no option. And what Trump originally said, complete and utter surrender. What are we doing right now?
Yeah, I know. And I don't want to get off on a tangent on our military strategy, because I want to focus on the propaganda aspect of it. But I think some of that is related to propaganda, because what happens when after October 7th? All right, the equivalent of, if you were to apply October 7th, those terrorist attacks, to the United States, it would be the equivalent of some terrorist organization taking out the entire stadium at the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
That's the equivalent population,
on video.
Yeah, and then filming it and celebrating it and raping the women and torturing people. Like, it's not just like a bomb dropped, right?
Right.
It's horrible.
Right.
And then those videos go all over the United States. And let's just say, I'm going to pick, let's say Mexico, they're our neighbor. I'm not insinuating Mexico would ever do that, but let's just say it was them.
Right.
What do you think we would do to Mexico in response?
Let's say cartel, because that's really kind of a good equivalency to how Hamas works, even with those people who might be in. They hide behind. They kill their own people. They hide behind people. Let's say it's a cartel.
But regardless, who it was, let's say it's a cartel in Mexico. Do you think there would ever be? I mean, there probably would be a few. But do you think the United States would be apologetic about, like, we blew up a building? I don't care if one of those cartel members was there.
And not only would the United States not be apologetic, they would be forcing the Mexican government to also be fighting against this enemy as well. If you believe that this enemy does not represent you, you will be fighting with us to eradicate it. In fact, I think that kind of happened recently, didn't it?
Well, and if they didn't, right? If that equal-sized terrorist attack happened and the Mexican government said, not our fight, we'd be like, well, then we're going to kill you too, right?
Silence
it wouldn't
equals
be
consent. Yes.
Yeah, it would not be a polite suggestion for them to join in the fight. It would be like, you're gonna do this, or we're gonna kill you and find someone that will.
Something
And
happened like that recently, like Venezuela.
yeah, very similar.
I mean,
but
very
like,
similar.
and the reason I bring that up is because what happened immediately after October 7th, and to me, it did not seem organic at all. Right?
It wasn't.
Was this massive influx of people saying, "Oh, look, the Palestinians are the victims here. The guys who just perpetrated this massive terrorist attack, tortured all these people, raped all these women, are the victims in this scenario."
Right.
And I think that was a prepared
It was.
response, and I don't think it's an accident that the leaders of that movement that perpetrated that attack were in Moscow shortly before October 7th.
Right. No, exactly. And I was going to say that very thing. In fact, it was interesting because I did take a tour of Israel for the first time last year. I actually got some ink from the oldest family. You'll see it right here. It's a Jerusalem Cross, oldest family in Jerusalem that dates back to the time of the Crusades. They were tattooing the Crusaders at the time, and so I went to the Holy Sepulchre. But when I was there, with this group, there were 2 Russians who were part of this group, which I found very interesting. And I was told that they had been invited because the Russians had been involved in working to get some of the last of the hostages released, which I found very interesting. I had a little conversation with them. They knew very quickly that I was on to what they were. And they chose to avoid sitting at table with me or be by the bus or anything like that, because I was asking the questions that sometimes, indicate, oh, I know, you know, those were the questions I was doing.
Don't say we know no here. That's
we know no.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is as I was there, I thought to myself, Israel, you know how these people are. You have allowed the Chinese inside your walls. You've allowed the Russians inside your walls. Why? Why, when you know that they have played the games that they have? And then I thought to myself, I need to step back for a second and say, and pause, right? Because they're in our gates and we've allowed them in our gates. So I can't point to the Israelis and say, why did you allow that? Well, we are allowing people like Neville Roy Singham to have assets. I don't know why we haven't frozen every single asset of that man who's involved in the absolute boots on ground pro-Palestine movement, like agent provocateur number 1 after George Soros. Why does George Soros have assets?
I don't know.
We have real infiltration of money of very bad actors into our country. And we have the power of the national treasury and the American government. Why are they still being able to fund?
Yeah, I don't know.
And that would be my, because they're pushing the psyops. And you're right, it wasn't organic. It's clearly not organic. It clearly trained. And a question that I had is, as well watching this, and I had it during the spaces that we were covering this, is that where is the offensive from the Israelis? The Israelis are hilarious. They do really good psyops, like positive psyops, but they're usually use humor as this. Where are the Israelis countering this? And then I had to take a pause, Nate.
We're not doing it either.
We're not doing it either.
Yeah, we're not.
Right.
And that's a problem. It shouldn't rely on just quasi-regular people on a YouTube channel,
right,
to be combating this, right? There should
but
be.
maybe that's where it starts. I mean, again, our brothers who have been in the psyops world, those of us who have been trained, we have a certain set of skills. And so maybe it needs to start happening. But when people hear that, they think, oh my God, you don't want to do a psyops in the American people. I'm going to present to you patriotism as psyops. Not everything is bad about psyops. People don't understand psychological warfare is a battle for the mind. And American patriotism is healthy. It's a good. And you have to develop that habit through repetition.
Mhm.
And so if you're going to work on a virtue, that should be probably one of the first ones you work on, patriotism. It's a true virtue, a classic virtue. Virtues are, as Aristotle says, virtues are not things that can be taught. They must be learned. You have to experience the thing. You have to feel it. So when I say in psyops, bad psyops, it's also good psyops, will play upon your emotions, right? That's why when you go and you watch a movie, a patriotic movie like Saving Private Ryan, or the series Band of Brothers, which is like one of my favorites. When you watch that and you invest in those characters, you feel the loss. You feel the pride. You feel the relief they have, right? You feel that. That whole movie is a psyop.
No,
It's a good.
Yeah.
It's a positive psyop, but it
true.
brings about those good things. We need more of the good, the true, and the beautiful, which is one of the reasons why I'm going to plug him. I have been listening to Jeremy Boring's podcast for the last few weeks. He's become a friend. I think he has really good very interesting people on his podcast. They have really good, wide-ranging conversations. And I'm listening to him while I'm driving 45 minutes to the base every morning, 45 minutes back. And I am not just entertained, I'm enthralled. I'm interested in these conversations. I said, that's a good psyop. That's it.
Yeah.
That's a good use of this platform. And yeah, go ahead, Nate. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, you know what I think one of the best, and I don't know if it was a psyop or if it was truly organic or not. I don't care, right? Because I love this country and I think it's a great place.
Yeah.
But the World Cup.
Now I'm going to say it was organic, but a good strategic communicator is going to see an opportunity. As Hillary Clinton once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Never let a good opportunity for patriotism and good old American, flesh and blood patriotism, that sense of brotherhood and culture that we pride ourselves in, whether it's food or culture, whatever it is. Never let that go to waste. This is something that Donald Trump used to be really good at. When you would go to his rallies, you would get a sense of that brotherhood, that patriotism. You've got the Trump gear. It's all kitsch. It's all kitschy, like the Trumpy Bear. Do you remember Trumpy Bear commercials? Those were amazing. They were amazing. You've got to watch that, Nate, because it is like one of the things that I would share with my Italian friends who loved Trump. And he's like, how can I not get this Trumpy Bear after it? It was such kitsch, but it was so over the top Americanism that they just loved it. They loved it, right? Because it just shows that we can even take ourselves not seriously, but we can love the fact that we're not taking ourselves seriously. That's another thing. PsyOps on the negative is always taking itself incredibly seriously.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure "Never Let a Crisis Go to Waste" was Rahm Emanuel.
It was, but Hillary Clinton also repeated it. I have the video of her repeating it, and it's one of my favorite little clips that I bring up on her, because she's talking specifically about COVID.
Yeah, well,
she's being interviewed on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's two monumental pieces of shit, in my opinion. So there's that.
Rahm Emanuel was part of the Clinton, machine. So
I think he was Bill Clinton's
advisor,
manager,
one of his advisors. Yeah.
Turd is what he is.
That's what he is.
Unfortunately, smart, but he is a turd, smart turd. Sorry, let me tell you how I really feel.
Yeah.
But kind of, progressing back. So obviously you have positive and negative, psyops. I think the
Yes.
World Cup, I agree with you. I think it was organic, and I think it's something that should have been capitalized on more.
I mean, Trump really
efficiently.
tried to. Trump really tried to, but there's something else that I found really interesting. It's not just, it wasn't just organic, and it wasn't just like an amazing situation that we got to see on social media in real time. And people responding even more towards the hospitality Americanism. Come visit us. We want to show you. I mean, that really is American. I've lived all over the world, Nate. That is true Americanism. The hospitality, inviting, and enjoying people, seeing people enjoy themselves and enjoy Americanism. But a thing that I think is like maybe even an organic counter to the non-organic psyop that we've been seeing in Europe against the United States and for communism, for globalism, for lack of borders, anti-Trump's, very anti-Trump. All of that is inundated in the news. The news is just awful in Europe. Which again, I mean, I threw it out there to Dail Wire, like, hey, you've got a Rome correspondent at the time. I'm like, let's set up, a Daily Wire Europe, because there's nothing, the wide open range of like ability to capture ideas, right? Like there's nothing out here, and it's true. There is still to this day nothing. Even people who say, well, the European Conservative magazine, it's nothing. Sorry to have to say, it's nothing. GBN News, no. So. But what I think I think the World Cup did was bring people who were really passionate about, obviously, football, coming in, or soccer. But lived in Italy for too long. I called the ocean, the beach, the sea today. I'm like, I'm going to the sea, and she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I'm going to go swim in the sea. What I think it was that people came to the United States and they opened their eyes to the reality that they had been lied to. And what did they do? They took their phone, and they began talking about it. And that should, again, bring up the fact of positive psyops, right? They bought into it. They enjoyed it. They agreed in their free will to say, I'm going to take my phone. I'm going to talk about what I've been lied about. I've been lied to. I love the United States. Americans, almost every single American adult I know has one of these in some degree.
Yeah,
that can use it.
Yep. And I think that there's a lack of, and I think particularly with people on the right, they're just quieter, right? They're like, I don't know why. I think, maybe it's because they're busy.
It's because they have lives, and they're walking. It's so funny because who shall not be named, literally said the other day that the people who were defending Mrs. Kurt in that group, I was one of them, but I was not active in that group. I had just been put into the group. But hey, I love that group now. I think it's great. Thank you for turning me on. She shall not be named. But what she said was that their full-time job, when she named Gary and myself, our full-time jobs were to I guess focus on her. And I thought to myself, only if you knew what I do.
Yeah.
But, people have jobs and lives. They touch grass. In fact, I was talking with a millennial. Very close to where I live this evening. Right before I came on, I was at this appointment. I was talking with a millennial, and I said the name that shall not be named. And she said to me, who? And I smiled. I smiled, and she's like, oh, I'm not really on the media. And she's like, I don't watch really the news. My boyfriend who's, military, if something comes up, then I'll just trust him for like communicating it to me. But she's not a trad at all. This was like almost the opposite of a trad. A woman who, had her own mind and does her own job, and she has other things to do, like go to the beach. or the C in
Yeah.
my case. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, not consuming copious amounts of social media is probably a healthy thing in general.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing. I think, we live in a country of roughly 350 million people. Candace Owens has 6 million supporters, which sounds like a huge number, right? How many of them are
real.
based in the United States, and how many of them are actually human beings, right? Like,
right.
And then you do it, and you're like, well, that's like sub 1% of people are paying attention to this. Nitwit,
right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? And it's just really not that influential at the end of the day when you think about it.
Same with Tucker, but I think what's interesting is that in their own heads they are, which I think could be used for psyops. I'm just going to throw it out there that photo that you presented earlier, it's really interesting, isn't it? It shows that they're open and willing to show themselves as the next wave of influencers in politics because their biases have been confirmed. In fact, I don't think I've seen on Tucker anyone who's been able to counter who's openly countering Tucker other than Mike Huckabee. And Mike Huckabee destroyed him in that television interview that he did when Tucker went to destroyed him. Yes. And it obviously that's scary for someone who wants their titillation, who wants to be who's like, oh, I'm very open for debate, but actually I'm going to just tell you the facts. And then I want to be confirmed in my belief system. So this is why he surrounds, and this is tribalism. So this is nothing new, but this is how it works. This is and if you're, say, a bad actor who's been trained in psychological warfare and really understands the human condition, so to speak, you're going to look for those people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're going to look for those people because all you have to do is, it's like that meme of the stick figure with a stick saying, do something. All you have to do is that like, do something. Just go a little further. Just dance, monkey.
Well, there was do you know who Quanah Parker is?
I've never heard of her. No, tell me.
Well, he's a guy.
He's a guy. So sorry about that again. Second mistake. Mea culpa.
So in the early 1800s, I think it was the 1820s, there was a family, the Parkers, who went and settled in Texas.
Okay.
And their family home, their homestead, was raided by the Comanche. And one of the youngest, Cynthia Ann Parker, was taken captive by the Comanche. And she ended up, she grew up as a Comanche and ended up marrying a Comanche chief. Her son, Quanah Parker, was one of the last Comanche war chiefs.
Oh, interesting.
And it's very, very interesting. If you're interested in that history, there's a book.
Yeah, I'm a history major. My focus is in Roman history, and so I think about Rome a lot. New York Times. But I want to read this. I want to hear about this.
The Comanche are fascinating, and the book. There's a book called Empire of the Summer Moon, and it's called that because the Comanche would always raid under a full moon, and usually in the summer because the weather was better. But at any rate, Quanah Parker ended up kind of assimilating into, like he went to the reservation and he was very well respected and interviewed a lot. And he was interviewed by, a white reporter, and this white reporter was asking him, how is it that the Comanche lost their territory? Like, can you explain to me what happened? And they were sitting on a bench. And Quanah Parker just, he just shifted over like an inch or two closer to him, which makes people uncomfortable. So the guy shifted away, and then he shifted over another inch or two, and then the guy shifted away, and eventually he got him to like get up off the bench. And he was like kind of like that. And I think that's how you manipulate people, right? It's not you don't show up and say, hi Bree, I'm with the FSB. Would you like to do some propaganda for me? There's money.
I mean, they do that nowadays because they feel that they have the edge. In fact, let me tell you, Nate, I was approached in that way. Actually,
I think I was. I'm not sure, but I think I was.
Well, they didn't say hi. I am the KGB. I was approached through another influencer on this platform. Actually, I'll just say it's Mari Narfal because he's photographed later on with Alexander Dugan. But I had been approached by his team a few years ago, and they said, we have an opportunity for a few people to go to Russia. Now, Nate, let me just tell you this. I was super tempted. Number one, I've always wanted to see the Bolshoi. I actually know one of the ballet ballerinas there. I've spoken with her. I definitely want to see her dance. She's one of the primas. I love ballet. It's been a thing since I was young. So I was very tempted with that. And I was also very tempted because I was not going to charm the Russians. I would let them charm me. I would be very open for them to engage me. But I have a security clearance, Nate. You know what would have occurred with me. I don't think I would have returned. That's what, I'm not so high level that people would be looking for me, so to speak. I really think that I would not have returned. The temptation was real, though, because anybody in journalism would die to have a chance to be able to talk to some of these people. Anybody who's serious in journalism, but not talk to them by platforming their nonsense, by asking the hard questions, which is something that, returning to your interview with Laura Loomer, I have to say I don't follow her, but I do think that she does ask a lot of hard questions, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm.
She has made a lot of enemies for asking hard questions. And I have to, like you said, I have to
stand by. I got to change my
There,
camera
you're fine.
battery. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
I can still hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have to. Hey guys, welcome to the internet, right? I have to say that I give her full credit. And Laura, if you're watching it, I have to say I'm giving you full credit for taking the having the integrity to say I was wrong. And having the integrity to be challenged from your own biases. A lot of people don't do that nowadays. And so I have to say, hats off, salute to you for doing that. If only more journalists were doing that nowadays. And Nate, there was something that I experienced when I was covering the Vatican a few years ago. And I saw firsthand, I've been fighting the PSYOPs war when it comes to ideology for some time. And it was because I was seeing it within Catholic media in particular. And I was seeing it with individuals who would be considered Catholic influencers in that sphere. And it's such a small pond. I mean, these people are pretty clearly, and they're mixed up now with some very interesting people. But I remember calling out again and again a journalist who would use anonymous sourcing, so-called journalists, use anonymous sourcing, claim to have evidence and claim to put a story out that was salacious, that was crisis pornography, with no actual evidence to support themselves. And they had been discredited multiple times. And yet people were just enamored with the story because it confirmed their already preconceived biases. And I've seen these people over and over again manipulate. And I got to a point after so many years of saying, the ends never justify the means. Truth is truth, and we have to serve it. And especially those who claim themselves to be Christian. If you believe Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and life, then you have to serve the truth, or you are a lie. You're supporting the deceiver. I got to a point, Nate, that I said, I'm backing off from journalism because it will drive you crazy when you see people again and again. It's like there's a video of I've seen it before where it's like a meme saying how God works with my soul. And it shows this sheep that's stuck in like a ravine. And this shepherd is like working to get the sheep out, right? And he gets him out and the sheep jumps right back in the ravine. That is how it feels when you're fighting this fight. And so I applaud people who say, I go and I touch grass. I don't know she who will not be named. I have other things in my life to do. I would say in order for you to keep yourself from going down back into the ravine, give yourself some time. When you start to feel that your emotions are starting to fray, step back. And I think that that's something any of us who have been in war also would say, because we've seen what happens when our brothers and sisters begin to find that wartime is normal. And that's the thing that I worry about for the Ukrainians at the end of the day, at those who are left after this, because I do believe that they will win.
Yeah, I do too. And I think the thing for me, like one of the experiences I got from, being in that environment is it takes a lot more than a social media post to get me worked up. Like truly,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like I'm like, all right, this guy's an idiot. You know what I mean? Like that's about it. And I just keep going. Right. But there are people who genuinely get upset because of your opinion or something they read. And it's like, dude, just calm down. It's not that big.
It's a lot of people actually, Nate. And you were right. Like you were talking about how it's like kind of keep pushing, people inch by inch until they give up ground. That boiling frog effect is exactly the thing that is the common standard for, and I'll give you an example. The anti-Zionism was not enough. Now we are seeing people who are either claiming Mao as their hero, or in the same breath, oftentimes Hitler as their hero. And we're seeing someone like Tucker Carlson platform an individual who says that Churchill was actually the evil guy and Hitler was just misunderstood.
Yeah. Hitler was just a misunderstood art student. You know what I mean? That just
5 years ago, would that have been acceptable conversation?
No, it shouldn't, and it shouldn't be accepted now, right?
Yeah,
it really shouldn't.
Nick Fuenteses of the world were relegated to, my friend Haya, she talked about this. There used to be a time of social shame that you didn't do things because it was shameful to do it. And COVID really opened that bottle, but we're not back yet. And we still have a lot of people doing very socially shameful things. And I would actually argue, now that I think about it, Nate, on this program, that COVID was the permission. It was leftists really took advantage of it, but it became the permissive environment that has brought us to the current state of the horseshoe right. They believe, and we have given them permission to act as they have. And there have been no consequences socially. I'm not talking about arrest them. I'm talking about socially, like where they are ostracized, where we're just like, we don't care. We're not listening to you. The way that the Ku Klux Klan used to do. Remember the Klans would come into town. I remember this in Indiana. Klan would come into town, and we were warned at school the Klan's coming to town. And of course, when you were warned at school the Klan's coming to town to do some kind of a rally, all of the school kids are like, "Oh, I'm going to go watch it because it's it's going to be drama. It's controversial, right? It's controversial." But the adults in the room didn't pay it any heed. They ignored it. They didn't even announce the Klan's coming to town. Who cares? Who cares? It used to be that way. It's not that way anymore. So what do you think, Nate? What do you think is the answer to this?
I don't know, because the difficult thing with social media is you can bot things, right? And this is what I think these foreign actors do, is they don't reward these people. Yeah. I don't think they directly reward them with cash influx. Even sometimes, right? You got Tenet Media and the Tim Pool thing. Right. I think that's going away. And what they're doing is that, you get somebody like Nick Fuentes. Let's say he says something, and the Kremlin's like, "Oh, we like that." They'll just reward him with a bunch of bot traffic. And what the algorithm thinks is, the algorithm, obviously, if it's a good bot campaign, the algorithm doesn't realize they're bots. Right. Or if they did, it would be a failed bot campaign. Right. So the algorithm's like, "Oh my God, this guy's really interesting. Let's put him in front of as many people and let me pay him more, and let me put him in front of real people." Right. So like if you post something on X, for example, and I've done little studies with this where I've had my friends, I'm like, "Look, I'm going to post something. What I want you to do is I want as many of you as possible to share it as quickly as possible." Right. And it's just this really like innocuous, just boring kind of post. And I share it, and it does better than like an actual poignant thought. Right. or it's just kind of slop. You know what I mean? It's just a sloppy post. And then, so I kind of monitored the metrics. So essentially what happens is X, there's a computer that says, look, this guy posted something, and within 5 minutes, it got shared 25 times. That must mean it's interesting. So we're going to amplify
it.
Who gets to see it. So you start out with a bunch of bots, and then that then gets in front of real people. And I think that's the game, right?
Right.
And then real people, because they're, especially younger people, are easily manipulated. You go, wow, this guy's got like 1 million followers and everybody's looking at this. Maybe I should pay attention to it. Right. And why is everyone liking this? Why are there so many positive comments? And, I need to go along to get along, so I'm not going to argue with these people in the comments. And then like advertising is a psyop, right? And I mentioned this last night to Laura, that I've heard advertisers say that if you want to get the message across, it's about how many times you say the thing you want the customer to hear.
Yes.
And it's a minimum of 3 times. You have to say it at least 3 times. So go watch a commercial and see how many times they repeat a certain phrase, or the number, or the little jingle that they do with the phone number in it. It will be no less than 3 times in the span of that commercial. And so somebody like Nick Fuentes, who might say some stuff that sounds absolutely crazy to people 5 years ago, but you hear it pops up in your feed every day from weeks at a time. And then that repetition kind of sets in.
That's
and it just
the normalization.
Yep.
It's normalization. So again, if you go, that's why I like people, like, I know it's a long interview, but when you go and you're driving to work in the morning, you're driving back, if you want to stay sane, you listen to Yuri Bezimov's interview. Why? Because he tells you, he opens the book on how this is done, and it's done in industry. It's like people are like, oh well, why would advertisers use psyops? Well, why did we engage Nazi rocket builders to be part of Operation Paperclip?
Because it works.
It works. And so these are things. I mean, it's fascinating when there is an FBI profiler who has written several books, and one of the books that he wrote is called Dangerous Personalities. Anyways, he talks about.
Was it John Douglas?
MIB. I'm losing I'm like 7:55. It's time for me to go to bed soon, Nate. I mean, I don't know about you. I get up at god awful hours in the morning, 5 a.m.
Same here.
So, I'm old. I'm not that youngster anymore. Yeah, but I don't know if that's his name. But I'll post him down.
Dangerous
That's him.
Personalities.
Yes, that's him. Joe Navarro.
Okay. Yeah.
You should follow him. But I think in one of his other, like, he's done some talks, I believe, and he talks about so the FBI does this. It talks about different ways of learning how to engage with people. Because he was a profiler, and I think he also did Jen, he also did the hostage negotiation, right? I think he did hostage negotiation well. So he teaches you how to mirror people, right? So that's
I've seen him.
You know it. Yeah, you know it. Like it's a great there. He does a master class on it. It's a great master class if you want to learn that. But I bring that up because they know bad actors are trained in this, especially those who are in agencies are trained in this capability, and they're very good at it. Even those who were the honeypots who were in Washington, D.C., they marked you guys for a potential engagement. They could have ended up just being prostitutes. I mean, like high-end prostitutes. That there's a lot of that goes on, from the Slavic states in D.C. as well. But they identify a type of person, and if they've been trained at all, they will mirror in order to be able to flatter. And you see that also in the social media world. And I think that's where the whole clicks and likes and popularity contests come into play, right?
Yeah.
It's not enough to be able to communicate important things or do investigative work. there's got to be not just a titillation, there's got, or a sense of crisis pornography. There's got to be a mirroring of what you're already doing. And so people study this in social media world. And I think that's where we see us. I believe mostly on the left, I've seen this on leftist social media. And they mirror things that are being said. And go ahead, Nate.
Well, I was going to say that something that you just mentioned, and I think this is an important thing, is people's willingness to be flattered, I think, is a weakness. Yeah. It is vanity and pride to a certain extent. I remember when I first got back from Ukraine, I was approached by somebody who, again, this is one of those things where I don't get to stick around for like the investigation that happens afterwards. I'm not privy to that information.
Yeah. Too bad. Fun time.
And yeah, I know it would be cool. Right. But so, at any rate, presented as a very pro-Ukrainian thing. I'm not going to name him in case I'm incorrect. Presented himself as a very pro-Ukrainian thing, had kind of a public persona. That does not mean they're pro-Ukrainian, by the way. Mm-hmm. Right. That's a way to get their hooks in. It can be, right. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, hey, we should meet, and it was close to me, which I also thought was oddly coincidental. So I went and met, and it was like, he was asking me about things that I think should happen. And then, with the conflict and how things should progress. And, it's discussing some of that stuff with him. Nothing, very general, statements on my part. And then he goes, well, look, I think I could get backing. And then he throws out a number of money, right? And it's 8 figures. And I'm like, we had a lunch together, dude. Now, I would love to be flattered and think that I impressed you to the tune of over $10 million, but I didn't. There's nobody does that over the course of an hour and a half, right? Like, that's not how people with money think. That's not how they do it. It's a very long process, right? Like, nobody's going to throw $10 million at me just because I went to Ukraine. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, even if I think I'm capable enough to handle an organization like that.
Right.
Whereas some people probably would have jumped at that and been like, okay, now I don't know.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. And I don't know if that was, on the level or not, but I'm like, look, the first thing I did in the parking lot was Google the location of the nearest FBI field office and report.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm like,
and why did you do that? It's because you've been trained. We go through training every year, CBTs, if you recall. Purple Dragon, et cetera, et cetera. We have to go through training on what occurs, especially if you hold a security clearance, on potential influence ops, right?
Well,
what you should do. I've been approached by Chinese when I was looking for a new contract. I literally was on the phone and I'm talking to this guy because originally, and I actually had to do the same thing. Originally, I thought it was communicating with a company that does, and it's a legitimate company that does global, like, geopolitical analysis, right? Great right up my alley, right? I'm talking with them. I do background. They're solid. I confirmed, this is my number. They were gonna meet it, right? What I did, and is a mistake, is that I did not double check the end of the email response. It wasn't a dot. The company's legitimate email was a dot global or something, and it was a .com. But who would have noticed, right? Who would have known until I got on the phone? I actually did a face-to-face interview, but the other person on the other line was not, didn't have his camera open, and he was definitely Chinese. Chinese, asking all sorts of questions, in which I got all his information and sent it to the FBI because it was an approach. And I was in a time, Nate, where I was looking for a contract. Like that, those financial numbers would have been good. Tempting.
Yeah. Well, the same with me. I just got home unemployed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Figured I hadn't landed on my feet yet. And I think, and I'm going to give an example of what I think happened. I mean, obviously there's going to be an argument, but like you have tenant media, right? And that Tim Pool's wrapped up. I think he's the largest voice in the tenant media kind of umbrella.
Right.
And what happened with them is they were approached by some investors who were Russian operatives.
Yep.
And they gave tenant media $40 million and said, look, we're gonna boost your platform and we're gonna help you succeed and all of that. And they and the people at tenant media go, we're just that good that we're worth $40 million.
Yes.
Right. That's the thought process, is we are that good.
Yeah.
And then, the response from the people that are actually the faces of it, right? The people that are actually in front of the cameras from tenant media are like, we were never influenced to say anything. Right. But that's not how it works. They don't come down and go, oh, thanks, we gave you $40 million. Now here, say this, right? It's that inch by inch approach, that Quanah Parker on the park bench. It's that, they slowly kind of morph. And what you started to see was like, if you go back and look at tenant media and the people, they were very open, they were just normal, like podcasters, and they didn't,
Right.
And then all of a sudden it all shifts to being like anything
We're
the
stars.
anything the Kremlin doesn't like, they also don't like, right?
Right.
And then those very same people will say, well, we weren't influenced. And I think what happens is, do you know who Green Beret Naptime is?
Oh yeah, he's one of my favorite
Chase.
people. We were
So-
Chase has been on with Gary and myself, so yeah, we've talked about this before.
Yeah. So Chase had, he said in a space one night, he said something that I've kind of repeated multiple times. And it's easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they have been fooled. Right. So like
Right.
once they've been fooled, right, convincing them that they were wrong. This is why I give Laura Loomer so much credit.
Yeah.
Right?
Same.
Because that's really hard. And nobody made her do that. Right. Like, it's not like they sat down, like
That's
forced
called
her to consume
called
information.
integrity. That's
Yeah,
called
yeah.
integrity. That's called journalistic integrity. In fact, I've had to retract and correct. I think she's retracted and corrected as well. That used to be the standard, Nate. And in fact, again, bringing back to the whole idea of cultural shame, people who did not retract, correct in the industry would be weeded out of the industry as journalists at one point, because in information, integrity was the most important thing for people at one point.
Yeah.
At one
It's
point.
not anymore. It's not anymore.
is
Now
not.
it's being first. It's being first. And sometimes just being the most sensational, I think is
Yep.
what,
That's psyops. I mean,
sensationalism.
that's why and it is demoralization, because you don't trust the media, right? So who do you trust? Well, you trust Q. and sorry to have to say, but General Flynn is good friends and takes his spiritual direction from the former Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, former Catholic Archbishop, I should say, who is now a excommunicate, and very good friends with Alexander Dugin, who speaks on a regular basis at Alexander Dugin's conferences. He's the spiritual director of General Flynn, who at one point was in charge of.
Yeah, didn't General Flynn go to like the FSB headquarters and like hang out with him for a week or so?
Yeah, I mean, like he used to be in charge of intelligence, right? Military, army intelligence. Yeah, and oh, by the way, I like to bring up Q because he was so deeply entrenched in it. It's interesting, the whole trust the plan. I've brought this up in Gary's Spaces before. Have you ever heard of the operation that the White Russians and the Red Russians ran? Well, it was the Red Russians ran against the White Russians during the time of the attempt by White Russians and pro-monarchists in England to try to rescue the Tsar.
No.
Did you hear? Do you know about this operation? I've got to find the name of the operation. Jen, maybe you could look at it. This particular operation, the entire idea of the operation was to convince the Red Russians were convincing those who were pro-monarchists, the White Russians, and those who were supporting them in Europe, to convince them that this was all like the Red Russians had been infiltrated, that there was a plan within in works in order to protect the king, the Tsar. The Tsar and his family knew about this plan, and you just needed to, and I no joke, it is direct quote, trust the plan.
Well, listen,
That
and it's
is-
another, yeah,
That's
it's another
the
thing.
mantra, right, of Q.
That's another thing that Shay says all the time, right? Is the propaganda that we're seeing coming out of, coming out of these operations now is the exact same word for word propaganda that was used to manipulate illiterate Russian peasants from the 1920s.
I mean, this
and
is
we're falling
because we
for it.
don't teach history. This is and it's not just us. Like Americans were like geography. We're like, where is China? I mean, we're really pretty bad at that. But what's worse, I mean, we still understand our American history. We celebrate it. The Europeans, I posted it the other day, when the EU was being formed, Pope Benedict XVI came out and addressed the fact that the EU's constitution blatantly ignored the Judeo-Christian centric roots. And he specifically said Christian, their Christian heritage. And he said, this is going to be an absolute problem because you're going to lose your identity. Right. And now skip forward over a decade and what's happening. Europeans are losing their identity completely. But why do I bring that up is because, again, it's two factors. It's the slow boil of the frog, right? And they've forgotten their history. In fact, in Italy, up until just recently in Italy, when the communists were running things, they were not even allowed to discuss Italian history. They were not being taught Italian history in schools. So our parents' generation, we're talking baby boomers, did not learn the Roman history, like Roman Empire history. They didn't learn any of that. They didn't learn about like the unification of Vittorio Emanuele, of the Italian states. They don't learn any of that. So
Wild.
Through multiple generations, and now what we're seeing in American schools being run by blatant communists. Communists.
Yeah, I'll give you an example too. So these the communist ideal, and when you see them involved in education, there's a woman named Marissa Straight. I saw her speak in Washington D.C., and I'm going to be honest with you, it scared the shit out of me. Like that, everybody
Really
needs
scary.
to hear what she's. Yeah, but there was a woman that I met in Dnipro, and she was a volunteer, and she was roughly my age. I think she was a little bit younger. But so she grew up and went to school, and midway through her educational period in life was the Soviet Union fell and Ukraine achieved independence.
Interesting.
And what she recalled, those are really interesting people to talk to, right?
Yeah,
because they have
very.
they have this dichotomy of what it was like before and what it was like after.
Yeah, they know.
And what she was telling me is she's like, look, I was a school kid, and Dnipro, Ukraine, you would think Kyiv would be like the center of the Soviet communist thing in Ukraine. Really wasn't. Dnipro was. That's where the Yuzhmash rocket plant was. That's where they built their Sarmat missiles. That was like the big industrial center of
of course.
So the Soviet elite from Moscow went to Dnipro, right? That's where they went. And it was this industrial city. And so that was kind of like an enclave. It was like a private, gated community for all the Russian Soviets.
The commies. Yeah.
Yeah. So the propaganda there was strong, right? And what she said was when she learned about the Second World War, she learned that there was two combatants, the Soviets and the Germans, and that was it. Like the British were not involved. Nobody was involved. It was just the Soviets and the Nazis, and that was it. And then we sat by and did nothing, and Russia saved, the Soviets saved the world from
it's so
tyranny.
Amazing to hear about like that type of wow. And I would guess that similar situations were happening in East Germany and West Germany. It's so fascinating. It's like the Chinese have a saying. It's not Confucius, actually. I think it was Confucius who said, "He who does not learn from history is doomed to repeat it." I think that's a Confucius. But it's true,
It's
right?
true. Yeah, whoever said it, it's true.
Yeah. It's true. And where why I find it very interesting, it's a little bit of a pivot to not to Russia, but to the Islamists in the Middle East, is that a lot of Americans don't know, a lot of Europeans don't know that 9/11 is a very important day in the history of the West versus the Islamic East. September 11th was the beginning of the battle for the siege of Vienna, where the Polish winged hussars
Yeah.
defeated at the gates of Vienna, the gates of Europe, the Ottoman Empire, drove them out of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, got them out of Europe. They never forgot that. So why do you think that 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 date was decided upon as the day for the terrorist attack?
Yeah, and we in the West don't hold as much we don't place as much weight on those anniversaries and dates, but they do.
They
There's
used
another,
to.
yeah.
They
There's
used
another,
to. We used to.
yeah. There's another interesting thing about the Middle East, and when I was over there, this was after the USS Cole was bombed. I responded to that. I was part of the MU that went in and secured the ship, and then stayed at the Gold Moher Hotel in Aden, Yemen.
Nate, did you know when she was launched again, the captain went off the coast of Yemen and played over the 1MC America F Yeah? That
American
song?
Badass. American Badass.
They said America
because
F Yeah.
they played American.
F Yeah. Coming again. Yeah.
They played American Badass as it was being
they did
pulled
too.
out.
They did that.
Yeah.
Yep. They did that too.
So-
They played several songs, but like over the 1MC, which for people who don't know what that is, it's the speaker system of the ship, and the ship was right off the coast of Yemen. It was really great. It felt great. Yeah.
But when they did American Badass as they were leaving, they played it on giant speakers, right? Like, so it wasn't just the 1MC. It was like they played it.
1MC.
They flew them in. Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Just absolute shit talking, trolling, like nice try.
Close, like Americans were great at it. We should be doing this as an offensive.
But here's what was happening. Like, so I met a couple people over there. I met one guy at the hotel we were staying at. He was the cook, and he hated living in Yemen, right? Like, he went to college in the United States, and he was like, I had to come back. It was like a family thing, and he was like, I wish I could be back in LA. He went to college in Los Angeles. And he was like, yeah, this sucks, man. I wish I was back in LA. So he was like super happy to see Americans. And one of the things he was telling me, I was down there talking to him one time, and he was like, you have to understand that, like, here's the cultural difference. In America, if your kids are out playing like at summer break and it's, be back before dark, or the boogeyman will get you. Right. You know who the boogeyman is in the Middle East?
The Jews?
The Christians.
Oh, okay. The Christians.
Like when he was growing up, because of the Crusades and some of the, I mean, we admittedly did some pretty vile things during the Crusades.
But I do think, again, fear and loathing in our enemies. Fear and loathing.
that went both ways, right? That went both ways. But the thing was, he was like, that's what we would say is like, don't go out at night, or be back before dark, or the Christians will get you, right? So that's one of those things that's a cultural difference.
And convert you.
But that is a psyop, right? That's an indoctrination that, if you tell a child that the most evil thing, the monster that can get you in the darkness is a Christian. And then you have the United States coming over and be like, let's just make a deal. You know what I mean? Like, no, there's nothing good can come of that, right? Like, there's going to be a built-in mistrust, or lack of trust.
And not just the built-in mistrust. It's also within their own religion that it's okay to lie, because the entirety of Islam is meant to propagate. If it doesn't propagate, it dies. And so if you understand the method and the intent, to me, Islam has seen the useful idiots, and the Islamists are saying, aha, I'm going to get them. I don't think for one moment Mamdani of New York is a communist. Not for one moment. He is an Islamist through and through, and he is exploiting that, and he's doing it with a smarm on his face. So I think when those people who are seeing this, all you have to do is take a look again at how he approaches communication. He is, he is the quintessential, um, Manchurian candidate for the Islamist groups. They know that coming in with this screaming Mohammedan, pointing at the sky and yelling at Americans that's not going to work. They've got to get the guy who's charming and saying, I'm going to give you everything, and appeal to the biases of people who are the majority of that city, the left.
And I think that this is one of the problems that we have as Americans, is I think our culture has been so successfully exported that the world understands our culture more than we understand the world. And we just assume that everybody else in the world thinks like we do, because we're like, we're so awesome. Why wouldn't they? But they don't.
I mean, yes, but that is a legitimate question, Nate. But yes,
yeah, you know what I mean. Like it's, but so I think it's very easy for other cultures to come here and manipulate us because they know what makes us tick. And we don't, as a culture, I think there's people, members of our society that understand it fairly well. But I think that generally speaking, as Americans, like most Americans don't understand the typical Middle Eastern mindset, right? And I'm not here to say it's good or bad or anything like that, but it's different from us. And I pointed it out.
And the Chinese are even more different than us.
Yeah, they're really different, and the Russians are different, and you know who you could do. Like I said this last night on the show, as who told me that? Putin did. Putin's the one that said that to our ambassador, right? Like it's just so.
But I do think that there is you can come to understand the Slavic culture and the Russian culture by understanding the history behind it. When you can read about how the Vikings settled Kiev, and when you can and Rus and from there, when you can read their literature, when you get a sense of the culture and the great prestige of the the oligarchs, and then the monarchy that was there, if you take the time to read and understand, you're going to have more of an understanding of their intent. I believe 100% what Alexander Dugin says about wanting, the way that he goes about saying he wants to see America withdraw from the world, because for the Russians, they have never accepted the fact that they, at one point, they were in equal court with Europe. They had a great empire, very wealthy. Catherine the Great, very wealthy empire, spoke French at the court. They were recognized as the elite, the creme of the creme de la creme. They want to, especially Putin wants to recapture that grandeur without recapturing the culture behind it, the freedom of that culture behind it. They see the United States as a quintessential threat to that recapturing.
Which I believe is one of the, I never think it's like one thing why a war starts. It's multiple things. But one of the large reasons, which they'll never discuss or never publicly admit, that they went to war with Ukraine is they could not allow a successful democracy on their border where there were so many familial connections with Moscow.
Not just that. Well, yeah, that's the key. It isn't just because you were going to have another ally of the United States on their border. The history of Kiev and Rus. To understand that Ukraine was the first Russia before St. Petersburg. Ukraine was the first Russia. Ukraine is where the Vikings landed. Ukraine, where they came together and formed what would become the Russian Empire. That history, and it's the bread basket of that whole area, and it's the ports there. It is utterly valuable, but it's culturally valuable. It's historically valuable. That is our land. and the Americans were going to come in and engage and normalize relations.
Well, and I think, you know, and also you have to think too, you have these people that are not living a very quality life, like Yuri Bezmenov was saying, unless you're one of the elite, unless you're part of the oligarchy, right? Your life kind of sucks in Russia, right?
Oh, I thought you
Now,
just smell bread. You go and you sniff the bread, and you can push
and you have
your
these
grocery shorts.
you have these
They've got these
wonderful
really
coin operated
beautiful
shopping
subways.
carts. Yeah, I know.
Like the subways are beautiful. They're so beautiful. You know,
Well, listen,
Yuri Bezmenov talks about doing the exact same thing with the journalists who came over to Russia. They did the same thing. Take them to the sub. In fact, if you go to North Korea, the North Koreans do the same thing. They take journalists to a fake like grocery store with fake employees who are there smiling and fattened.
yeah.
This is blanket
Yeah.
101 Russian psyops.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? Like it's fairly obvious. And like this is the thing too, when Tucker
Who had been watching Tucker beforehand is they're like, this was the same thing they did during Soviet communism, and they
Yeah.
opened it up. But what he could have done, what he should have done instead, if the Russians were smart, sorry, you missed your chance, guys, for this. But what they could have done, I think they tried to do a little bit with Candace, but Candace is not cultural enough to be able to really handle anything. And sorry to have to say it, but the Russians are incredibly racist. They are. I mean, if you recall, Putin putting up a certain image of a monkey when Barack Obama was visiting Russia. Just going to throw it out there, guys. They're incredibly racist in Russia. But what they could have done was say, let us take you to the most Russian cultural areas. Let's take you to the Bolshoi. Let's take you to St. Petersburg and see like the history of the czars. Like let's see this whole grandmother Russia again. Instead, they take him to a grocery store and have him buy food and like the subways. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. We're gonna kind of reiterate, you know, just thinking of Tucker Carlson being seduced by a coin operated.
So utterly seduced. He bought it, but I'm almost wondering if he wanted to be bought, because I mean, in some ways, I think that he has such an issue with his dad. I mean, I know this is like kind of like psychological, but his dad was so anti-Russia and served within the agencies, right? He was like one of the ones who fought against the Russians, and now Tucker is like undoing, and his brother, like, you know, when he's sober, is trying to undo like his father's legacy. And one has to ask, like, as a man, Nate, like, to undo your father's legacy, there has to be some level of either hatred or shame of him,
or bitterness. Bitterness in that he could not get into the agency, which is something that Putin touched upon in their interview, and I think that struck a nerve.
Oh, really? I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
So at the beginning of the interview, Putin made a comment, and it was in effect, it was like, I actually made it into my intelligence agency.
Hook, line, sinker. He owned him. That was a nod. That was a nod to him. That was the nod to people who are watching, who understand this. Was like, I have him. He's mine. Because Tucker didn't walk away from that and saying, you know, did he fight back? Did he say anything? Oh my God, that's huge. I'm gonna have to find that.
Yeah, it's in there.
Oh my goodness, Nate, what a tell.
Yeah, and that, you know, and that's very, like, that goes back to Putin. He's not dumb, right? Like, he's not stupid.
He's not.
He knew exactly what he was doing when he said that.
Yeah.
And
he played the psyop game.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, he was like, now at that point, Tucker almost has to win him over, right?
Right.
So he has to, you know, so he's got him now, you know. So I thought it was interesting when I first saw it, and I was like, that was really sharp of Putin to make that comment. Like,
look, like, again, like, you can look to your adversary and say, they play the game well.
Well, you got to have respect for them. If you don't,
Yeah.
if you just constantly write them off as idiots, you'll find out one day that they're not, and it'll
They're
be a bad
not.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's do this. Let's kind of reiterate for people the kind of internal defense mechanism if they're online and they see something that's, you know, I think to say that if you see something and it strikes an emotional nerve right away, you know what I mean?
Yes.
That it's, you should probably, if your emotions get involved, you should probably immediately step back and say,
This is very hard for women. This is very hard
said
for
it.
women. And look,
You
look,
said
I'm
it.
not
I
gonna
didn't
get in
say
trouble. Look, we have to say it. We are the nurturers, okay? There's a reason for that. We teach our children. Like we have to have patience and love and like sweetness and emotion to be attached to that thing that is yelling at you and screaming like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and needy and clingy, right? There has to be emotion involved. If not, like the children would not survive, right? So, and we know this. So I would appeal to women and say, we are both heart and mind, right? Don't allow yourselves to be manipulated. Don't allow people to take that power from you by taking you one way or the other through your emotions. Be titillated if you like, be entertained, but do it in such a way that actually benefits you and your family and like the people around you. The amount of anger from these people, and I have to say, not just the anger, but the exploitation of financials. Like these people are making money off of exploiting you, like taking your time, taking your patience, taking your goodness, and making money off of that for crisis porn. So don't allow it to happen. And men, I'm going to yell at you for a second, okay? You're better than this. You guys also have brains. You don't have to be manipulated. You don't have to be effeminate and sit all day and opine about nonsensical conspiracy theories, right? Go and freaking touch grass. Go do. Like, go serve somewhere. Like, go do the thing. Build the thing. Like, kill the bugs.
Go on a hike.
Go on a hike.
Get a dog.
Yeah. Oh my God, get a dog. Please. There's so many dogs in that need to be adopted. I think every man needs to have a dog, but to sit there and opine, it's very effeminate. And here we are on the podcast. I'm not calling you effeminate, Nate. I'm not doing that. I'm certainly not doing that. But we also have, we're getting close to what 3 hours, 2 hours and 30 minutes. Yeah. I don't think I've seen your shows or your interviews or Gary's go past 3 hours. Maybe they have. Maybe Jen. Maybe you could say if it was. But
I think the longest was 5 hours.
Right, 5 hours out of a day.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
I did find that clip. It's only 26 seconds if you guys want to see it.
Yes, I want to give the Tucker clip.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, please.
With the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand. We should thank God they didn't let you in. Although, it is a serious organization. I understand. My former vis-a-vis in the sense that I served in the first main directorate, Soviet Union's intelligence service.
With the backing.
Oh my gosh, his face. Oh my gosh, I'm not talking Tucker's. I'm enthralled. He is playing him like a fiddle. Holy moly. Have you spoken to anybody about who understands Russian body language? Because that also is different, folks.
Oh, it very much is. So is Ukrainian, for example. There was times where I would think they were angry, right? And I'm like, dude, calm down. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, why you seem pissed? they're like, I'm not mad at all. I'm just asking a question, you know? And so it took me a long time to kind of figure out like, oh, okay, he's just genuinely asking a question, right? And I brought that up to somebody who's Slavic, and they're like, that's the most depressing thing I've ever heard. And I'm like, no, it's cultural differences. It's not that big a deal. We just got to learn
It
each
is.
other. You know?
Right. But I would be interested to hearing if there is someone, and probably maybe I'll reach out to some sources who understands the body language when reading the human side of things. I would love. I'm reading something. I'm sure you're reading something into how Putin is expressing himself and his eyes and his body language.
I'm sensing like a bit of smugness. Like, you know what I mean? Almost like that's what I saw. But it's.
Oh, no,
I was watching.
saw.
Like when I watched it, I was watching your reaction more than I was watching.
I saw his joy. Like he loves this game.
That's the smugness I'm seeing. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, I get the smugness, but there is like a sense, you know, like when we go into operations and we go in and we're just like full on, like we are fully involved in the game. You know what I'm talking about? There's like a sense of joy when we know that we're doing the thing, right? It's almost like an excitement. Putin is there and he's looking at him and he's fully in the game and he's running circles around Tucker. And he's doing this to the agency. Oh my goodness. I'm going to download that clip and keep it in like the clips that I have. I have a clip, talk about PSYOPs. I have a clip of the CCP early days of COVID. And it was one of the first things I had gotten. I got this clip from, I'll see if I can send it over to Jen. I got this clip from a source in Hong Kong. And they said, this is very serious. That's all they said to me. And they sent me the clip. And this clip is of what was being promoted by the CCP early on when COVID. Remember when we saw some of the videos that were coming out of China, people getting really sick on the street, right? That was around Thanksgiving time, I think 2019. And that's when I started to make I started to pay attention because I get this clip and it's so poorly produced, PSYOPs. It's so bad. I'm like, knowing how the Chinese do their PSYOPs, I'm like, they are in full on panic mode. This was not supposed to get out this way. I have my thoughts on why it got out and how it got out and what the intent was. I do believe it has to do with the Hong Kong uprising, the millions of people marching at the time against the CCP. I think they were going to target specifically the millions marching in Hong Kong, but it got out of control very quickly. That's my assessment. I don't think it was like a lab leak like Wuhan virus only. Their potential was another lab leak in that. Maybe that's what they were pushing, but it was being developed there. It was being weaponized there. For sure, it was military development. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Nate.
We have to get to some of the super chats. No, we got to get to some of the super chats, and then I think we should probably wind down a little bit. I do have to get up at 5 a.m. again.
Yeah, me too.
Another 11-hour day.
Yeah,
and it is in I am working outside in the Arizona heat, so I think everybody should thank me that I'm still conscious after 11 hours.
Thank you for your service.
Heat in August.
Thank you for your service.
It says Megan J 4366. This topic isn't just fascinating; it's something every American should know. I agree. That's why I never shut up about it. So yes, I agree with you.
Thank you, Megan.
Jenga 333. Nate is doing great. We so appreciate him sitting in for Gary, and thanks, Jen, for all you do too.
Yes, bravo.
I'm not easily flattered. I discussed that earlier, so I'll take the compliment, but don't let my head get too big. It's bigger than it is on this. Has Nate ever heard of Operation SIG? No, I have not. Is that where pistols suddenly go off all of a sudden in holsters? I'm just kidding. No, I don't know what Operation SIG is.
I have one of those. I've not had that issue yet. Please, God forbid it.
Just don't slap
I'm looking it up.
Support for the big guy taking a well-needed break, or support for the big guy taking a well-needed break. Sorry, I can't read. I'm apparently illiterate as well. That's something else that happens. Jen, Nate would be great on it. Yeah, I was a Marine. I'm even dumber. You know what I mean?
Oh, were you Marine? I didn't know.
Check this out. I keep them handy.
Look at that.
In case I get hungry. You know what I mean?
Semper Fi. I love it. Love it.
Yeah,
Just
Jen,
saw a class actually go through, by the way. Just saw an enlisted class running the what's it called?
Crucible. What are
Crucible.
you
Thank
talking
you.
about? Yeah,
Crucible.
wow,
Saw it
that's cool.
recently. Yeah, pretty cool.
Jen, 06 Chevy guys. Jen, Nate would be great on a channel. Listen, I have a job, and then all the preparation that goes into this, and like trying to find a guest, and the stress that goes into that because I'm freaking out. Maybe I'll get more comfortable with it, but as of right now, you know,
Sorry, Nate. Sorry, Nate. Sorry, Nate. That text I will keep.
Oh no. I thank you for the compliment though, but oh man, this.
Before you read this, hold on for a second. Sorry, odorized ramblings. Operation SIG, derived from the Russian acronym, I'm not going to read it, means Zionist governments. It was a covert Cold War disinformation campaign launched by the Soviet KGB beginning after 1967 Six-Day War. Its primary goal was to weaponize propaganda, incite globalized hatred against Israel, and align anti-Zionist narratives with anti-Western. I'm going to read into this. I've never heard of. I knew about the propagation before World War II of the protocols of the Elders of Zion for sure, and that was a psyop as well to cover up the operations they were doing before World War II. But that's interesting. I'm going to look into Operation SIG. Thank you.
No, that's really cool. Yeah. Odorized ramblings. $5.56, 556. I love it. My standard caliber donation. He's a wordsmith as well as a philanthropist. Not too many supers tonight. Shout out to Nate, Bree, and the greatest producer, Janus. Apparently, Jen, you are now an ancient Roman, which I'm sure Bree will appreciate. That little US.
I appreciate that too. I appreciate it. Wow.
Mike Klikovich. It's a very Russian sounding name. What are you doing here? I'm just kidding. Gifted 5 Paramount Tactical memberships. Thank you for that. Odorized Ramblings again. Gifted 5 Paramount Tactical memberships. It's a shame you can't give, decimals of a Paramount Tactical membership. You could have given a 0.56. Patriot Lady 1991, $5. Thank you, Nate and Bree, for hosting and guesting tonight. Appreciate you both. We appreciate you too, Patriot Lady, whose name I don't actually know. So that's the super chat. It's pretty thin. You guys, I guess, first of all,
they don't like me.
I think it's probably more me. I'm pretty boring. Well, also, just so you guys know, I don't keep any of that because I'm guest hosting. That's still Gary's. It's his channel. I'm just helping him out. You know what I mean? So
I think Gary needs to donate a glorious gun wall that he has in the back of his studio. I think you need to get one of those glorious gun walls as well, Nate. Maybe that's what will bring the super chats in.
I got about 20 guns in this room around me currently as we speak. I'm just zoomed in on my fat head. You know what I mean? That's the reason you can't see him.
You don't have a glorious gun wall? Do you have one like Gary's?
I don't want Gary to get demonetized because I'm showing firearms in his videos. But no, I do. I actually make guns.
Ooh, you and I are going to have a conversation because I really want to get that Crusader gun, from Spike Tactical. Have you seen it? Okay. Have you seen Spike stuff?
No, yeah, I do. I make more like I make machine guns and auto cannons and miniguns.
Oh, wow. Well, that's interesting. Do you make the ammunition as well? Do you do that?
We make some armor penetrating, like 7.62, 338, and 50 cal armor penetrating projectiles. So we do that, but yeah,
nice.
That
is a skill.
So my gun wall would. I'd need some industrial strength walls to hold up a 30 millimeter cannon.
Probably.
but yeah, I think, just kind of going back to kind of closing thoughts. Look, the propaganda is going to be there. It's not going to go away. We can't get to a point where it doesn't exist unless we just isolate ourselves from the from the outside world,
Yeah.
right? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The internet's always going to be around. So you're going to be exposed to this stuff. The key is just being educated about it, knowing that it exists is one layer of defense, and then being able to kind of recognize it and visualize it is another one, right? So there's a couple things that I've learned to do. Like, number one, if you see a profile commenting like the most vile, hateful stuff, you know, in response to you, and you look at it and they have like 12 followers, it's a 10-year-old profile, no profile picture, you know what I mean? And like 3 posts on there, that's probably not a real.
And a name with like 500 numbers after it.
Yeah, I mean, so those are like the obvious ones, but generally speaking, if you see a post that's like, hey, your entire institution is bad, like, you know, America is just a fundamentally racist nation, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And then you're like, okay, why are you saying that? You know, and it's either going to strike a nerve of making you angry because you don't believe that because you love your country, or you feel like you might be a disenfranchised, you know, minority, and you're like, oh, that makes me angry.
I agree.
It's true, because it's
Right.
true, right? Step back and think about. You got to really step back and think, and just take a moment to think and be like, okay, what are they saying, and does it add up? All right,
Right.
and there's always going to be an element of society. I mean, look, we have a flat Earth society. There's going to be some idiots. Right. It's just, and flat earthers are idiots. I say that every time I get the opportunity publicly. They're morons. They're lonely morons that need a community. So
Sad.
they found the flat Earth society.
Kind of like the Groypers. Sorry to have to say it, but I mean,
No,
same
it's true.
thing.
It's true. So, you know, like, knowing that we cannot make it go away, you have to create, you know, kind of a mental situation where you go, look, I know it exists. It's like saying, I know that there's a risk of, you know, getting in a traffic accident when I get in a vehicle, but you still get in a vehicle and you're you know,
Exactly.
you don't get into it afraid. You just pay attention while you're driving, right? And you wear your seatbelt and you have insurance and you buy a car with airbags, right? So it's kind of mentally, you know, get yourself some mental airbags. So when you see something and you slam into a wall of like, you know, something that's trying to enrage you, you have a little mental cushion and you're like, I've thought about this beforehand. Don't freak out. Don't get sucked into this. And just kind of, you know, give yourself the ability to step back. And then also, in reference to last night's, you know, show, if you have a certain preconceived notion, give yourself the ability of saying, and like, in reevaluating it. Right. And that doesn't mean you have to change your opinion, but step back and say, okay, look, if I was looking at myself from the outside, how would I look? Right. How would I appear to somebody just observing me and my kind of beliefs from the outside? Would I be crazy? And if the answer is like,
give yourself
maybe
some grace too, you know, like give yourself some grace. People fall for stuff. This is the people who I'm talking right now to the women who've been listening to the woman who shall not be named and the men who have been following her and her conspiracy nonsense for, you know, nigh on a year now. And now we have an actual court case where evidence is overwhelming and we're seeing the discrediting, and you find yourself demoralized because you fell for the nonsense. Give yourself some grace because you're not the only person who did, and give yourself the grace enough to be able to step back and say, I fell for it. Let me go pick up one of those things back there. They're called books. Learn history and see that not only are you not the only person who fell for that psyop, but there's a pattern of this throughout history, which means that it happens over and over again, that people get brought into it. Yeah. Know your enemy and don't do it again.
Yeah. And that's something. Oh, hey, there's no super chat.
Wow. Thank you.
9toe. What happened to number 10? Bree, you and Nate were awesome. And yes, you shamed me into it. Oh, because I talked about the lack of super chats. You're right. You gotta help.
Yeah, like Gary's gonna be so sad that we just kind of stunk tonight and didn't get any additional super chats.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to say it 3 times.
But look,
and maybe they'll do it.
Oh, the 3 times. You got to repeat it over and over again. So, but look, like, and last night you have Laura Loomer, and this is what's so interesting to me about it, right? And I get it. She's very politically polarizing. I get that people might be upset with some of her political takes. I understand that, right? But speaking just on this specific issue, right? She has a very big platform, and there's a very and probably rightful concern that if you go back on your beliefs, you'll lose a significant portion of that.
Right.
Right. And she's certainly intelligent enough to be cognizant of that potential fallout from, doing essentially a 180 on any given issue.
Right.
But she still had the courage to do it. And the result is, has she suffered a little bit of fallout? Maybe a little bit, but she's still breathing, right? She came on a show. She's still doing her thing, right? It's not the end of the world.
And she caused other people to also question their views on the war.
Yeah. And look, I know there's people that genuinely dislike her. I'm not doing that, right? Because I think what she did was very courageous, right? Like,
and took integrity.
It really did. It really did. So, if she can do it, you can do it. So if you take a step back and look at some of the things you've been thinking about and maybe the ideas you've had, and again, I'm not telling you have to change your mind on something, but if you look at it and you go, look, all right, I did some research, and you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Like, I'm telling you, the sun will rise tomorrow. North will still be north. You will be fine. That was a reference. Shame to me too.
Yay, shame is great.
Super Canova. Super Canova, since I'm illiterate, the supernova. But thank you very much, Super Canova.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think that to me is my closing thought. And Bree, if we can keep it brief, because I do need to get some sleep and I got some things
Are
to
you
do.
telling me to keep something brief? I'm just kidding. I will just say it's been a privilege to get to know you, Nate. It's been fun, brother. I look forward to future chats. Maybe you'll talk about guns, and I will learn everything I can, because I only got to shoot a few of them in the Navy, being on those ships. I have to say, I understand people right now being burned out by a lot of what we're seeing in the world, whether it's the ongoing back and forth, the communications wise, from the Trump administration on the current situation. Very frustrating. The SWO who communicated with the Trump administration on the Straits of Hormuz the day they signed the ceasefire. They agreed to the ceasefire. I was like, they're playing you, because they're saying they control the straits, and the straits are international water. Why are they not talking about this? It caused me a little frustration. I had to push back a little bit. All I have to say is there's a lot of black pilling going on right now. We are definitely seeing it on the right. We're also seeing the left being fully seized right now by the Democratic Socialist of America. Who would have thought? They're saying the quiet thing out loud. There's a lot of opportunity right now for normalcy. And I hope and pray, as we start to head into the school year, that you're going to hug your kids close, take them to the park, enjoy your cookouts, do the American thing that everybody in the World Cup who came to the United States got a little taste of. We get to do every day. Enjoy your time while you are able to, before your kids go back to school, and realize that none of that nonsense has to touch your life if you don't want it. And if you allow it in, just be eyes open and how you are being played and manipulated, if your emotions are being played and manipulated. And Nate, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. One last thing, Bree. See, Odorized ramblings. I'm doing it again. 556. Beetlejuice.
No, don't do it. She's going to manifest.
Yeah, aka Candy EI. 06 Chevy guys, dude. This is a great thing. Like, I feel like a salesman now. I made like an extra $15.
You're gonna have to say it 3 times.
Additional super chat. Nate, Bree, Jen, you're doing Gary proud. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh my God, what is going on? Vintage Apollo 1111, $10. Nate, I've become a super fan from these recent shows. Please keep doing shows.
Wow.
Well, maybe. I'll think about it. It is it's a lot of work. And if I have a normal job and I got to add that onto it, it's difficult. Maybe something like once a week. You know what I mean? That way it's not so.
Help you.
What's that?
I said I know somebody who might help you.
No, what's her name? Just kidding. Thank you, Jen.
So, lady who's to be unnamed or remain unnamed.
Oh, Voldemort. We have a female Voldemort. What's going on? No. So, Bree, one last thing. How can people find you online?
So I'm on X more scarcely now than I have been over the last, I would say 10 years because of my current position working for the Office of Secretary of War. So I am on X and I'm also on Facebook and Insta. I do have a Substack. I haven't used it recently. I feel very much like I'm really letting go of a lot of my reporting or just like stepping back from it. And it's not intentional. It's just, I'm trying to learn how to balance a life where I have to be in a skiff all day. So that's where you can find me on social media, that or the beach in the, Gulf of America.
Okay. Well, Jen or Bree, stick around. And then I'm just going to say as a final closing thought, don't just prepare your physical body, for things, prepare your mind and, flex your constitution. And I'm not talking about the constitution on a piece of paper. I'm talking about the one in your head. Flex your constitution from time to time and test yourself mentally, psychologically. I think it's a good thing and it's healthy. And then that could prevent you from, just like preparing your body and training can prevent you from being a victim physically. Preparing your mind can prevent you from being a victim psychologically. So just, it's two forms of exercise and you got to do them both. And with that being said, thanks for coming out. And maybe I'll do another episode in the future. Maybe not. I don't know. It's a lot of work.
Twist his arm.
So, yeah.
Super chat.
All right. Thank you. All right. Good night.